me here, please.
Sure.
Good.
All right, everybody. The time is 6:07 p.m. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the Galt City Council for December 15th, 2020. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic emergency, we have to continue handling our city council meetings much differently than we usually do for the protection of the public and our city staff. I'm going to ask our city manager now to give us a brief explanation to the public. Mr. Hines.
All right. City Manager Lorenzo Hines here, and good evening. This meeting of the Galt City Council is being conducted by teleconference/video conference in compliance with the state and county stay-at-home orders, and as allowed by the governor's executive order N-29-20, which allows for deviation of teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. Members of the public will see the council members and city staff who are appearing via remote telephone connection. City council members will be held virtually. City council meetings will be held virtually by teleconference and video conference only until further notice. Today's agenda states that rather than attending in person, residents may submit written public comments via email to pubcom@cityofgalt.org prior to the council meeting. Any written comments that were received will be read out loud during the city council meeting by the city clerk on the appropriate agenda item, subject to the customary 5-minute time limit, unless the same individual also appears and requests to speak live during the meeting. We will take the live comments first, and then the written comments will be read out loud. We are also using a Zoom webinar format, which allows the public to provide live public comment. Members of the public may use the link to enter the webinar as attendees. They should also be able to use the raise their hand option in the Zoom webinar to let us know if they would like to speak, and should do so when the mayor announces the time for general public comments or when a specific agenda item is called if your comment concerns an item on the agenda. We request, as we typically do in person, that speakers provide their name and address when they are called on to speak and their line is unmuted. But doing so is not required. Attendees should also see a lower hand feature if they change their mind and do not want to speak. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my comments on this particular issue.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Ms. Hubert, can you please call the meeting to order?
All right. Vice Mayor Sandu.
Here.
Councilmember Papineau.
Here.
Councilmember Vandenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Lozano.
Here.
Mayor Farmer.
Here. I would ask you now all to join me in a brief silent prayer. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll move on to our next item. Agenda approval, additions or deletions. Council, do I have any?
Mayor, you want me to read the replay statement?
Sorry. Yes, please do so.
Okay. This meeting of the Galt City Council will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, local government affairs channel on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will air Friday, December 18th at 9 a.m. and Saturday, December 19th at 9 a.m. A DVD copy is available for checkout from the Sacramento Central Library.
Thank you, Ms. Hubert. We'll now move on to item B, agenda approval, additions or deletions. Anybody on council? Nobody? Okay, we'll move on to item C, presentations. Tina?
There are no presentations.
Thank you. We'll now move on to public comment. I'll ask Ms. Hubert to please read the statement for public comment.
Under Government Code Section 54954.3, members of the public may address the City Council on non-agenda items. The public comment section is for the City Council to receive comments, except for brief responses to questions. No discussion or action may be taken on any item that is not listed on the agenda. Please limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Due to the statewide emergency and social distancing guidelines, public comments may be submitted via email to pubcom@cityofgalt.org and will be read out loud, subject to the customary 5-minute time limitation. Also, members of the public may participate electronically via https://us02 web.zoom.us/j/8269 583-8669, webinar ID 826-9583-8669.
Thank you, Ms. Hubert. Ms. Rodiker, do we have any hands raised online?
We have no hands raised on the attendee side.
Ms. Hubert, do we have any written comment?
No written public comments.
Thank you. I will now move on to item E, reports by city council members on regional boards, commissions, and committees. Start with our vice mayor, Mr. Sandhu.
Yes, sir, I have a couple things. Last week, we have a meeting with Sacramento Transportation Authority. We received the comprehensive financial report, CAFR, from the fiscal year 2019 and 2020. And we also, as a board, appointed a new Sacramento Transportation Executive Director. Her name is Sabrina Trego, and she's gonna replace with the Will Campton. That's the couple item we had the last meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sandhu. Councilmember Papineau.
Yeah, I don't have anything to report.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Vandenberg.
I don't have anything to report.
Thank you. Councilmember Lozano.
Yes, I have a one item to report on the SACOG Policy and Innovations Committee. We had quite a full schedule. We extended some lobbying services for Green Means Go initiative, as you all are aware, or may not be. SACOG has embarked on a long process of working on an initiative called Green Means Go, which addresses the aggressive ability to cover the 19% greenhouse gas emission reduction that's required by the state. And so been doing a lot of work in the legislative end, and so we extended that contract with KP Public Affairs. We also received the CAFR, and there was an unmodified opinion, which means SACOG has a clean opinion and for its financials and transit fund audits. Talk a little bit about the mega region MOU, and that's, as you remember, that's a mega region with Sacramento, San Joaquin, COG, as well as Metro Transportation Commission, which is out of the Bay Area. And we're all working together to try to further each other's projects and be more competitive on a regional level, a mega region level. And then lastly, we heard a lot about telework and SACOG's initiatives on helping not only government agencies, but private businesses in the telework area and reducing vehicle miles traveled based on that. And so there's some pilot agencies out there and companies 13 of them that are doing telework. And pre-COVID, those telework numbers were 1 to 25% from the 13 pilot. Their participation was 1 to 25%. Now it's 75 to 100% telework. So the interesting thing is and one of the things that we brought up was, how is this going to affect business? And so, telework's fine, and if you have the infrastructure to do that long term over the internet and bandwidth and all that, that's okay. But we also need to look at how it affects business. And when people don't go to work, they're not necessarily purchasing from those businesses that are around their work. And so part of this pilot is going to be a study on what that looks like and how it affects business. And their SACOG's working with Sacramento Chamber of Commerce and a bunch of other agencies to address that issue as well. So some challenges ahead, but certainly we're going to have the ability to ferret all that out and see what works best for the region. So, and that is all I have. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Lozano. It's actually very interesting information, actually, to see how that changes the landscape of our economy with more people working from home. I myself attended the Sacramento Library Authority board meeting last Thursday. It was a fairly brief meeting. We had a closed session item, and then in open session, we did approve a contract extension for a year for our library director, Ms. Rivka Sass, who has been with the organization for a long, long time. And then we will be looking to go out for recruitment on a replacement before her 1-year extension is over. We did talk about some closures, some branches, and some various things, with COVID affecting the libraries. But other than that, it was that's about all we had. So that concludes my report. Anybody else have any comments? All right. Okay, we will move on to item F, which is our information consent calendar. It is recommended that items 1 through 5 be acted on simultaneously unless separate discussion and/or action is requested by a council member. Since we had no items pulled from the consent, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Motion moved by Councilmember Papanow, seconded by Vandenberg. Is that correct?
Seconded. Go ahead.
Did you get that, Ms. Hubert?
Yes, thank you.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu,
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau,
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano,
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Motion approves 5-0. Now moved on to item G, scheduled matters, notice of public hearing. Do we have any matters on this tonight, Ms. Hubert?
Not tonight.
All right, we'll move on to our regular calendar, item H. First item is H1, City Manager's Office. Subject is coronavirus COVID-19 update.
Hi.
Mr. Hines.
Yes, sir. Let me get my video going here. All righty. So I'm going to share my screen here and share the document that I'll be reading to you tonight, just in case folks want to follow along. Given the sincere nature of this particular issue, I just wanted everybody to see the statement that we're reading. Now, before I get started, I wanted to let the public know that since our December 1st meeting, the number of cases, COVID cases in Sacramento County has gone up 35%. And that's 35% in 2 weeks. The number of deaths in Sacramento County has gone up 20%. So this pandemic is definitely surging at this time, and it's wreaking havoc on the area. The number of cases in our city, Galt, has gone up 43% in the last 2 weeks. We have gone from 957 cases to 1,369 cases in 2 weeks. The number of deaths in Galt stood at 8 for a long time. Unfortunately, we lost 3 individuals during the last 2 weeks, and we're now up to 11 deaths in our city. So I can't understate how we need to really take care of each other. We need to mask up. We need to stay 6 feet apart and go through all of the protocols to protect ourselves and our loved ones from this devastating pandemic. So I'm going to read the statement. And on December 9th, the state of California announced that the greater Sacramento region had met the intensive care unit availability criteria of 15% or less to trigger the state regional stay-at-home order. This order took effect on December 10th at 11:59 p.m. and will remain in effect for a 3-week period. The order will be lifted when the region's projected ICU capacity meets or exceeds 15%. The state will assess the region's ICU capacity on a weekly basis after the initial 3-week period. As of today, the greater Sacramento region, and that's the region we're in, ICU capacity is at 14.9%. Sacramento County Public Health has issued an updated health order that aligns with the state's regional stay-at-home order. Sacramento County residents are required to stay at home as much as possible and minimize mixing with other households in order to slow the surge of cases and hospitalizations to help prevent overwhelming our regional ICU capacity. In alignment with the state regional stay-at-home order, many sectors must close all operations until further notice. This includes bars, breweries, distilleries, wineries, hair salons, nail salons, barbershops, indoor playgrounds, personal care services. Additionally, the following sectors are permitted for outdoor operations only, with mitigation measures until further notice. Drive-in movie theaters, maximum 25% capacity or 100 people, whichever is fewer. Gyms and fitness centers, places of worship, maximum 25% capacity or 100 people, whichever is fewer. Recreational facilities, athletic fields, playgrounds, tennis courts, skate parks, etc. In alignment with the regional stay-at-home order, the following sectors are permitted for indoor operations while still maintaining mitigation measures. All retail, maximum 20% capacity. Standalone grocery stores, maximum 35% capacity. Childcare, critical infrastructure, hotels, lodging for critical infrastructure workers or to provide housing solutions for the homeless. Libraries, maximum 25% capacity, medical and dental care. And so those are permitted for indoor operations while still maintaining mitigation measures. Restaurants may operate for takeout and delivery only. Any dine-in, indoor or outdoor, is prohibited. Staff continues to monitor the state's updates and will keep council apprised of any major changes. The good news is that the vaccine has arrived and is being administered throughout the state and throughout the country and throughout the world. It's expected that roughly 1.39 million vaccine doses will be administered in California by the end of the month. So we do hope that there is a glimmer of light on the horizon to help us get through this pandemic. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes my comments, but I just want to say, please, everyone, take care of yourselves and take care of your loved ones, and mask up, stay 6 feet apart and wash your hands, and take all the necessary precautions to protect yourself from this devastating disease. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Before we continue on, could I ask that those of you that are not speaking, if you could keep your microphone off? I hear some background noise from somebody. I just want to make sure that we don't hear that. So if you're not speaking, please do check your microphone. Our next item will be from our Community Development Department, item H2. The subject, actually, sorry, does anybody have any comments from the council regarding the statement that Mr. Hines read? Councilmember Lozano.
Yeah, just an observation. We get this update pretty regularly from City Hall, but certainly at both meetings each month. The observation that I've made, at least in the last several weeks, has been, at the beginning of this, even over the summer, it was hard to find somebody that knew somebody that had been infected and or hospitalized by this by this pandemic. And I will say that my observation, at least over the last several weeks, has been that more and more people that I speak with are familiar with someone who has been infected and has had some, at one level or another, to fight this disease. And so I think it's interesting that it is cold and flu season, so we would expect the numbers to go up. But I do think that they've gone up dramatically. And again, the more people I talk to, the more somebody says, "Hey, my cousin or my daughter or somebody has it." And so I'm with the city manager. We need to do what we can to protect ourselves, and but on that same note, do what we can to also support our local businesses who are now yet going through another downturn, and do what we can to support them. And I'd like to thank Amy Mendez and crew for what they're doing with the initiative to really have people get out there and support our local businesses. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lozano, and I do agree with all of your comments. Very well said. Thank you. Does any other council member have a comment on this matter? I'll see if we have any public comment. Rose, do we have any hands raised on this item?
We do have a public comment. I have Bonnie Rodriguez.
Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Bonnie Rodriguez on behalf of the chamber, jumping in here for our president who got stuck in a car somewhere. So I'm going to kind of shoot from the hip. On behalf of the chamber, we recognize that COVID is a very serious issue. And like Councilman Lozano said, so is it a serious issue for these closures for our businesses. And I appreciate all of the statistics being shared, not just through City Council, but other forms from the county and the state. However, statistics that are not being shared quite as readily, I would like to share with you and remind you of. The first is that Sacramento County has done their own data and has shown that only 7% of the COVID cases can be attributed to eating inside restaurants, 7%. And only 17% can be attributed to other businesses. And that includes the large businesses like Walmart, all the way down to the small businesses in I can't even think of any of the small businesses in town, but because we have such big ones, but the other small mom and pops, 17%. And as the county has reminded us time and time again, that the vast amount of spread is coming from private functions, especially private functions in the home. So right now, looking at the data, which everyone wants to continue to refer to, this is data that is not being talked about. And what this data shows is that businesses are being held accountable for something that they have no control over. And I think Mayor Farmer has said this on other occasions. So with all of that data being said, and with the severity that COVID can have on an individual's health and a family's health, the business community, the chamber, would like to know from the city if the city is going to continue to practice educational approaches for the businesses and the residents as far as enforcement, just as the Sacramento County Sheriff and Sacramento County itself has decided to continue. I think it is very important that our business community especially is aware of where the city stands on enforcement, because there is a lot of fear out there and a lot of people ready to lock doors and walk away. So they need to know from the city, are you going to continue with educational enforcement? And that's pretty much my statement. If you have any questions on how else the business community is faring, we did our survey, we have those results, and it is pretty grim. It is pretty grim. It's going to take many businesses many years to recover. And that was 2 months ago before we had the second shutdown. So I'd like you to keep that in mind. And it would be nice if the city let the community know if they're going to continue with the educational approach for COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Do we have any other raised hands, comments? Rose?
We do not.
Ms. Hubert, do we have any written comment?
No written comments.
Do I have any council comment in reference to the comment that we heard?
Yeah. I just take a second to echo what Councilmember Lozano said. You know, I had not until the last week where I've had 2 deaths within a degree of separation. So, you know, it is getting closer to home for a lot of us. And at the same time, would like to thank Ms. Rodriguez for her input and echo that we need to speak to our state and local officials that we need to educate people to take steps for what is doing the damage and not further the damage to things that are not causing the spread. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Papineau. Any other council member have a comment on this matter? If not, then I would like to comment. I do agree with Councilmember Papineau and what Councilmember Lozano said before on all levels. You know, we all are now all know people who have had the virus and gone through or known somebody who has passed. And so it is that degree of separation is decreasing. I also agree with Ms. Rodriguez in that, you know, it's having an effect across the board and also in respect to our businesses. And we very much want to protect the economy of our business, our city, and balance that line there. I would like to I would like to see possibly something that Kevin kind of mentioned, maybe if and I don't know if this could be more of a future agenda item. I fear doing so. We're over a month out from our next meeting, though, unfortunately. But maybe Mr. Hines, if you could maybe see if there's a, I don't know the right way to do this, but what I would like to see is maybe if council could draft a letter to our county and state leaders, you know, asking, you know, about additional funding and when can we expect that for our businesses, because that's obviously important to have that. And then also for you know, to please keep in mind the types of businesses that are being affected most under these mandates, and be mindful of those when they make these guidelines, and as these guidelines are very fluid, it appears. So I don't know if that's something that maybe Harry, you can jump in. Is that something we can maybe just discuss outside of the meeting, or how can we proceed? I would offer it as an agenda item, but like I said, I feel like we need to do something sooner than later if we can all agree to do something as such.
So if you're talking about doing something with related to COVID, then that is on your agenda because the update is on your agenda. If you're talking about getting together, so if a letter was drafted, for example, individual council members could look at the letter, provide input potentially to Mr. Hines. But if there was disagreement, then they would have to wait until you scheduled a meeting.
Okay. Well, then, like I just mentioned, I would propose to see if my other council members would support maybe our city manager drafting a letter, maybe with some input from Ms. Mendez, who's very close to this topic as far as the business side of it. And with two things in mind. One is to put pressure for funding for our businesses. I know the first round of it was kind of ugly for us. We didn't really get anything. And then with all the stories we've been hearing about fraud and such, I have a big lack of faith in what we're going to get around. So that, and then also to, about the mandates and be mindful. Is that something that the council that my fellow council members would support, having something drafted up that we could all approve?
I would.
I would as well.
Councilor Vandenberg, Councilor Lozano, what are your feelings?
Yeah, I think I would be supportive of it with, as long as we can come away with the parameters of it. And I think you've laid that out pretty well. I'm going to do some stuff on a personal note to do some activism in this, but I think a letter from our entire group would be perfect. And I think that we hit on not only funding, but also the mechanism in which people receive the funding. There was a lot of money last time, but not a lot. The mechanism in which people were able to receive it was difficult to maneuver, and it was pretty restrictive. And so I would say is to loosen it up and really, have it speak to the fact that we would like to have this for our local businesses, but also, make a statement, like you said, about, hey, this is affecting our local economy. And I think we're in a unique situation where, we're not supported by, our local economy is not supported by all these large companies. And so it really affects us hard. Yeah, I say we go for it.
Okay. Vice Mayor Sandu, thoughts? Your microphone, you're still muted, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I will support that idea you going to propose and see what kind of letter is, and then we can review the letter. Is certainly business, they need support. Give you example, last time the government gives you the PPP, but most of the people I go through with, the people really need it, they does not receive the right money. Well, they look for the back, every business, they look for the back 12 month of what your employees expense, but some of the small business, they work themselves and sometimes they are relative work. That's why they don't get the right amount. So as a small business or as a council, we should have something we can do, send a letter to, the state or the local, if they can do the requirement to getting them money, should be a very kind of thing so everybody get the benefit, not just some people. And I agree with you that that's kind of a pressure we need to put on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it is an interesting dynamic in in a small town such as ours. Unlike a larger city, we have a large majority of our businesses are small businesses that are not corporate or franchise, and so it hits them really hard. And we do have a lot of the particular businesses that have been fallen into this new mandate, that are really, I've had a lot of people coming to me and they're very concerned. So I think we need to, as a city, need to really advocate as strongly as we can, including what Rich said with connections, that each of us may have within, the higher ups, with relationships that we may have with county supervisors or even state leaders, assemblymen, whoever that we could reach out to and really, put that pressure on and make our voice heard. I mean, we're a little town, so in the grand scheme of things, if we wrote to the governor, is he going to read our letter? Most likely not. Maybe just a staff member or something. But I think we can do a lot of work at maybe. Well, we should still try. And I think those letters to the people below the governor down are gonna, there's a high probability that we'll be heard. And I think that's where our voices need to be the strongest. So I appreciate all the support from everybody to do that. I think it'll be a good thing for us to do. And Mr. Hines, do you have any questions about what we're asking for?
No questions at all. We'll continue our efforts to advocate on the city's behalf. I'll be happy to draft that letter, and Amy Mendez and our finance director, Claire Tyson, we will collaborate on that letter, and we'll have that in front of you all within the week. And but we will also continue our advocacy efforts, both from the financial standpoint and the economic development standpoint, those efforts with the county to also further get some further clarification on how these dollars are being distributed. And we'll also make sure that this letter reaches the highest levels of government, and we'll start with the governor and work our way through the hierarchy from there.
Great, thank you. And I look forward to seeing that letter. And Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, I just before I forget, because I've been doing that a lot lately, forgetting what I'm going to say. I did want to address what Ms. Rodriguez said as it relates to what the city is doing in terms of our local businesses and not necessarily taking an enforcement approach to anything, but we're doing more education. And it's my understanding that we have been working with the chamber on delivering that message out. So if that's not happening, I would encourage the city staff, if the rest of the council agrees, that we should be delivering that message to our local businesses. What I heard from Ms. Rodriguez was that there's some skepticism or some businesses are concerned because they don't know if the city is going to take enforcement action. And again, I go back to my understanding was I thought we were on the education piece rather than enforcement.
Duly noted. Councilman Lozano, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, Councilor Papineau, do you have a comment?
Yeah, if I could add one more thing. I appreciate the effort and focusing this letter in our communications on the money and the support from the state. At its best, that's inefficient and slow. However, to turn toward what Ms. Rodriguez said, and she's asking about city enforcement, we need to include in our communications too that it's imperative that we look at relaxing these restrictions based on the statistical information, because it's out of our hands when a group like Alcoholic Beverage Control comes in at the direction of the governor and starts punishing our businesses because they're trying to survive. So, you know, the locals, we can educate, we can not take, an enforcement track. However, from what I understand, it's coming, and I'd like to try and address that in our communications as a group and personally as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I do agree with the both of you that it is frustrating and disappointing to see the mandates seem to not match some of the data. And again, and I think some of it might have to do with, where it's a blanket mandate. And unfortunately, Galt being in Sacramento County, we're kind of bundled in with much larger cities with like Sacramento and Elk Grove, our closest neighbor. And so what maybe is not, maybe the data is slightly different for us as it is for somewhere else, but unfortunately we're kind of bundled in. But I too would like to see more data driven, the mandates more specifically targeted, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I think we dodged a huge bullet. I say we, I mean the city business climate with the ordinance that was proposed last week at the, I think it was last week, at the county supervisors meeting. And unfortunately, our supervisor, Donna Tolley, asked very good questions. And I actually spoke with him this morning. I'm sure that maybe some of his others have spoken with him as well, and others. But we dodged a big bullet right there, because that would have been game changing for as far as Galt having a say in what we're doing, at least. What should I put it that way? So thank you for your comments. If there's no other comments, I think Mr. Hines understands what we're asking for, and I look forward to seeing the letter, and all of us can, give our stamp of approval and get that sent off. And I think it's just a first step, but I think it's an important step, and then we can kind of see how things play out from that point. So I appreciate all the support on this letter. And if there's no further comment, I will move on to the next item, which is going to come from our Community Development Department. Item H2, subject is the 2021 through 2029 Housing Element Update Kickoff Presentation by Mr. Craig Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, if you would.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, tonight's item is our kickoff hearing for the 2021-2029 Housing Element Update. Within your city council packet, you did see a December Housing Element newsletter that's being provided to you tonight, and as well as we'll start working in getting that out to the public on our website. I know we have a large email list, and we want to make sure we're getting this notification not out just to electronically, but making sure that we're hitting populations that maybe don't have an ability to get this electronic, but trying to get paper copies out to some of our senior centers, as well as some of the apartment complexes, mobile home parks. And that's something we're going to be working on. That's important. This council has made it very clear that public outreach is important and that we're reaching out to as many people as we possibly can. In October, the council entered into a contract with Mintier Harnish. Mintier Harnish prepared our 2030 general plan, as well as our 2013 to 2021 housing element. They've had a long history in working in the city and are well positioned to prepare our housing element update. The presentation tonight will include housing element requirements, legislative guidelines, planning schedule, project schedule, and public outreach. And tonight, representing Mintier Harnish, we have Amy Yang and Rick Russ. They're our project leads on this. And so I'm going to turn this over to Amy and Rick. And I believe they're on the call now.
Yes, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Right. Good evening to the mayor and members of the city council and staff members present in the public tonight. Want to go through a brief introduction to what's coming up with the housing element. As Mr. Hoffman mentioned, we're right at the beginning of the process, just having started a few weeks ago. And so we're right now in the midst of data collection. We'll be moving on to our next steps, but wanted to make sure we got to the council as soon as possible to get you up to speed with what's going on and what our challenges might be in general, and to get your basic ideas on what you'd like to make sure that we understand as far as moving forward. So we have the next slide. So as mentioned, I'm Rick Rust. I would be the project manager for this effort, and Amy Yang is also joining us tonight, who will be assisting as the deputy project manager. We'll both be intimately involved in the development of the document. I believe Jim Harnish may also be in the audience. He's the principal for the firm and was also involved in the earlier planning efforts for Galt and will be assisting in this. So Mintier Harnish has been in the state a long time. Some of our founders were involved in the original creation of the general plan guidelines. And as Mr. Hoffman mentioned, we have been involved in Galt for a long time. And so we're looking forward to continuing that relationship. But as part of our work, we've worked on 50 or 60 general plans and that many housing elements itself. So we bring a lot of expertise in doing that work and the challenges coming up with this next cycle of elements. Basics, the housing element is just one of the elements of the city's general plan. All of your elements are supposed to have equal weight and they're supposed to have consistency among each other. But the thing to note here is that the housing element is unique in that it is the only one that has a mandated timeline for delivery. The housing elements are typically done on 8-year cycles in the current rounds. And there is a mandate for when you have to have it completed and what period it will cover. We're in what they call the sixth cycle, or this is the sixth time that housing elements have been updated. And the cycle will cover from May 15th, 2021 through May 15th, 2029. So our objective is to get this plan finished as close as possible to the May 15th date. And that'll start your planning period for the next housing element. The next slide. So the housing element in general provides a look at both your current housing needs as well as your future housing needs, at least out through this next 8-year planning period. It identifies as part of this a look at what are the opportunities and constraints that have an effect on the production of housing. And then at the end, it establishes the goals and policies that will direct our future actions. Next slide. So as we look at this, part of it will be looking at our existing housing stock and how can we best protect the housing that we currently have, looking at affordable housing that's currently in the community and making sure that it's protected. That is, if it has deed restrictions on it, if it has other affordability constraints on it, can we make sure that those continue into the future? Want to make sure that we can maximize what housing opportunities we have. Now, a lot of the focus in doing our housing elements will be on what they call the lower income categories, because those are the ones that are the most challenged for the production of housing. But in a broad sense, the housing element is supposed to cover the housing for all income levels within a community and make sure that we have the broad spectrum of housing to cover the needs of everyone that wants to call Galt home. But we will be looking at how, especially we can focus on the provision of the lower income housing. And a lot of this is because it is more difficult to produce housing at an affordable level. We will be looking at what governmental constraints are imposed on projects and also what physical constraints. If there's issues about flood control in certain areas or are subject to flooding, if there's issues about infrastructure availability, we'll want to look at that. From a governmental constraints side, what are the fees and the permit review timelines that are required for every project going forward? Those are part of the constraints. The housing element is quite a bit of background information or discussion about your current situation and how you go about the review and the production of housing. Then new to the state law is also looking at how we make sure that we provide a fair and equal housing opportunity basis within the community. So next slide. A key component will be housing site inventory. I'll actually hit on this a little bit in the next slides, but I wanted to highlight that the inventory must include the full range of housing types. We look at mobile homes, factory-built housing, rental housing, housing that's owned. We need to provide for those experiencing homelessness at this time. So what are our homeless care facilities, emergency shelters, even if these are not in the community, what are the local regional support systems for that types of housing as we go forward? Next slide. So as we go forward in this and looking at our sixth cycle, we'll often be talking about this term RHNA, which stands for Regional Housing Needs Allocation. This is the basis for all of our numbers. Now, when we talk about the production of housing, the city itself is not responsible for the production of housing. What the city is responsible for is to make sure that you have adequate sites to develop to provide this housing. This is still something that would be done by private developers, nonprofit organizations, or others. Now, the city can be a participant, but you're not obligated to provide the housing just to support its production. The little graphic on the side shows where this all comes from. So the state of California establishes an overall number for how many housing units need to be developed in the state. And then that's divided up among the different regions. Your region is represented through SACOG, or the Sacramento Council of Governments. The Sacramento Council of Governments got together with all of its member jurisdictions and worked on the allocation that would be done at the local level. So this included an allocation to every city in Sacramento County, as well as an allocation to the unincorporated areas of the county. And that's where we're at right now. Next slide. So here's the RHNA chart for the overall SACOG region. And if you click it once more, it'll blow up Galt's numbers. Now the RHNA allocation for your next 8-year cycle, this is showing that you need to provide for 1,926 units, or at least the space for them. Now, this is broken up by income categories. We have very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. And for these categories, there's also an extremely low category, which falls below this number. So each of these categories, we need to provide housing attributable to those. When we talk about siting or where this housing may occur, the extremely low, very low, and low are typically grouped into a conversation called lower income housing. So it covers that broad spectrum. And typically you're talking about apartment type style housing at that point, and something that would allow up to the 30 dwelling units per acre, at least in that zoning category, to qualify if you're using density as a representation for affordability. Next slide. And hit it one more time. There we go. I did want to show you that Galt, like every community in California, is seeing a notable bump up in the RHNA, the allocation that's given to the jurisdiction. So we show the 5th cycle, that is the housing element that is expiring in 2021, and the 6th cycle, which is the housing element we're currently producing. And you can see how your numbers have changed and have increased by 2.5 to 3-fold over the numbers that you required in the previous cycle. This is obviously going to be a challenge for all jurisdictions for how to find this amount of space and find this kind of provision. You have a little bit of differences in the allocation between the different income categories, which will be accounted for when we do the siting analysis. But producing or finding locations for the 1,926 units will definitely be a challenge that we'll have to address as part of the siting analysis. Next slide.
Oh, I was going to say, Rick, if I could jump in really quick, and I want to make this clear to the council. We have to identify the sites for these housing numbers. There isn't an expectation that we have to build these units or that this number of units will build over this 8-year period. We're just locating sites for these amount of units. And there's a big distinction to that. And I didn't know, Rick, did you want me to handle this slide or did you want to take care of it?
If you want to touch on it, that's fine. I can go through here. We talk about our site selection. This, as I mentioned, is a big deal. We have to find the locations that will support this. And density is often used as the stand-in for affordability. So when we're looking at this 1,926 units, we will obviously first start with your current general plan and your current zoning designations to look at what could be accomplished. So we're looking at vacant land. And we're also looking at what is considered underutilized. That is properties that aren't fully utilized in their designation. Now that doesn't mean that if a property allowed 20 dwelling units and there's 19 there, that would be an underutilized property. This is typically something where the land value exceeds the value of the buildings, is a simple rule of thumb that's used. So this may be that you have a property that has a barn on it still and is designated for residential, for instance. Underutilized is also vacant parking lots would be considered an underutilized property because it has something constructed on it. Looking at the breakdown of the income, which we just showed on the previous one, we'll then also look at the constraints on the various properties. What are the physical constraints? Flood zones, exposure to noise and other air quality concerns next to major roadways such as the interstate. We'll also look at constraints from the governmental side, and we'll also look at the availability of infrastructure. That is, if a property is currently not served by sewer or water, could we expect that that sewer or water would be available to that site within the 8-year planning period? That's important for us because we can only count properties that we think have some viability within the 8-year planning period. As we go through this, we're likely going to need to find some additional sites. Your current inventory of vacant land will likely not be enough to fulfill this entire arena need. This is the stage we haven't completed at this point, and we will be coming back to both the Planning Commission and the city council to discuss some of those findings and make some of those determinations. But we're expecting that we will be looking at adding some additional sites at perhaps higher densities, and we need to talk about where those are best located within the community. But we'll give you all the math as we go through this to make sure you fully understand and can talk to those in your city about why those decisions are being made and what the changes might need. If there's any changes to designations, we will also have to go through and designate where we need general plan amendments or rezones to cover those.
And I would say that what the city of Galt's seen with the Eastview project, the Liberty Ranch project annexation we saw in 2016, the Notch area, those recent annexations, they do have land classifications that definitely do help us meet our RENA numbers. So those lands will be important in this process. I think next slide.
Yeah, that would be great. Just going to briefly touch on some legislation. The state has passed a broad range of new legislations dealing with housing in the last couple of years, and definitely since the last time your housing element was updated. And what we need to do in this update is to make sure that the element is completely consistent with the requirements of state law. Now, there's probably about 16, 20 changes, new legislations that have come about that we'll have to address. I wanted to highlight a few of those. We highlighted the additional housing element site analysis. There's new rules for how to look at the constraints analysis. And there's also new rules that tell us we need to look at housing sites that were used in our previous elements, and that some of those would now have to be by right if we want to utilize them again. So for instance, if you had a vacant property and the law states that if you used it in both your 4th and 5th cycle elements and they're still not built, you can certainly use them again, but to use them again, you're going to have to make them more as a by right kind of designation. Affirmatively furthering fair housing is a big deal in the change of law, and this is a document that, or legislation talks about they overcome patterns of segregation and to address disparities in housing needs and access to opportunities throughout the community. The third one I highlighted there is the no net loss zoning, or Senate Bill 166. What that means is we have to have adequate sites available should you find that you have vacant property and you're going to, for an example, build 100 low-income housing units in that area. And when the project actually comes in, you only built 90 units of low-income housing on that site. You basically owe the state 10 more units. And so within a short matter of time, you have to come up with those 10 more units, either through redesignations of other locations or identification on a list of properties. We typically suggest an HCD, and when we say HCD, that's another one of those acronyms to know. So that's the California Department of Housing and Community Development. They usually suggest that you have a buffer of 15 to 30% on top of your RENA number in order to cover this no net loss. So again, that's going to be a trade-off we're going to have to look at and discuss with the council as we go forward on this. Accessory dwelling units are a major potential in meeting some of your low-income housing needs. An accessory dwelling unit, you may call a granny unit or a small accessory unit in the back, can be used for a rental housing. The state has also changed some of the laws now where properties can now have 2 accessory dwelling units, one an exterior unit and one a unit that's built into the main structure. Now these can count towards your RENA numbers, and they often do provide for low-income housing. So how we can help to encourage this, especially on lots that have adequate space, will be some of the policy document we'll be talking about later on. Next slide. There's a number of other changes for density bonus and how to deal with surplus lands that the community may have, etc. I was going to highlight SB 6. Standardization of the sites inventory. We're now required to provide all of your siting within a Excel spreadsheet that we provide to the state. They use that, and you'll use that every year to report your progress, and they will use that to check up on how you're doing. Next slide. 2 more slides for the council tonight. One is just highlighting our overall project schedule. We mentioned our element is supposed to be starting up towards May. There is a grace period after that in case we don't get completed by the May timeframe. But this is our schedule right now. Now we're proposing to include venues so that we can have public engagement throughout this. And besides these meetings, there's also other public engagement that will be happening, which includes items such as the newsletter you received. And we're also working right now on translating that newsletter into Spanish, so that'll be available for others off of the city's website. We are going to do some other data investigations throughout the community to find out what's currently happening as far as future development in the community. And then, as shown on the slide, we're going to be meeting in a venue every month. That's a public forum and would allow for public testimony and public input. Our next one in January will be the Planning Commission, where we'll talk about existing conditions and trends and look at some of our housing needs assessment. February, we'll also go to the Planning Commission and talk about constraints on housing development and what we might do about that. In March, we talk about a housing site inventory. In April, coming back with the City Council to talk about the current draft document and where we're going with that. And next slide. And of course, you'll be provided updates throughout this by staff, and updates will be available anytime the council wishes to have further information on where things are going. In the May timeframe, when we provide the draft document to HCD, they'll do a 60-day review. We'll then work with HCD during that 60-day review period to finalize the element and actually go through adoption in August of 2021. HCD certification actually comes after you have adopted the element, which seems a little odd perhaps, but what's supposed to happen is after the 60-day review, you get a letter of substantial conformance stating that your element is found to meet the state laws based on the changes we've gone through with the state, and that the 90-day certification should be more just a routine matter at that time. But that's the overall layout of our timeline and structure. And of course, we can answer any questions for you right now. As I said, we're just at the beginning of the process, and we look forward to any input the council may be able to provide us as far as things to look out for or be aware of as we move forward.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Rust. I have some questions, but of course I'm going to let my fellow council members go first. Do any of the council have any questions for Mr. Rust or Mr. Hoffman regarding this presentation?
Yeah, I do have a couple.
Mr. Papineau, go ahead.
You talked about the density kind of being a substitute for affordability because we don't know the market conditions and what price points are going to be and so forth. So my question is, at what point in the planning process does a site, is it considered an allocated site? I mean, do we have to get, how far into the process of approving development do we have to get before it's qualified for our housing element?
In the housing element, we will be providing a list of sites, and we'll talk about the densities and the income levels that we expect that site to perform at. So there'll be a list of all the sites that we find to be available. We would hope that that list would be in excess of your RENA number, so that if there's any concerns by HCD about what we've included, that will accompany that, plus cover that topic about no net loss. Now, as far as the sites, if we were to need to rezone the property, we do not need to rezone the properties at this time. You'll actually have 3 years after adoption of your housing element of which to complete any necessary rezonings. And most communities are using that time to work with property owners to make sure that you have the site's approval, that you have somebody that's ready to go, and make sure that you can do whatever is possible to get that development up and running in the 8-year time period.
I guess I was just going to follow up with what Rick had to say. Is based on the zoning that we have on property, we do have designations that allow for low density housing. And what that does is that allows for some of the moderate housing we need to provide, and the above moderate, that's going to be more expensive housing. And then if you take a look at our zoning, we do have designations like an R2, which is medium density, R3, which is a higher medium density, and those can allow for duplexes. Those can allow for apartments, and that shifts to a completely different demographic as far as what the type of affordability that that housing allows for. Some of that is going to be a lower price point for sale. Some of that's going to be rental. There are portions of housing that we have to provide that it isn't going to be for sale. It is going to be rental housing that spans the whole spectrum that what we're looking at. But really, when we talk about affordability from our perspective, we're talking density, and that allows a certain amount of housing units per acre, and that's really what we're doing.
So as long as we have the area with the proper zoning that we can project will satisfy these, that settles the housing element. And then, of course, when we have development proposals come forward is when we get into perhaps having to shift things and move a certain density from one area to another to try and work with a development.
Yeah, and I think when we're looking at site selection, we're trying to be very realistic in what we think is going to be built there. HCD does require that we take a look at our past developments, identify what a typical density is for when we're doing some of our low density housing. How many units per acre are we fitting on that? Are we coming in at 4? Are we coming in at 5 units per acre, 6 units? So they want to know a known average. So I'd like to think that by the time we're done with this and we've identified these sites, we know what a typical density is going to be on that property, so that we're coming up with very realistic numbers for what we think each of those sites are going to hold for units. Because what we don't want to have is a situation in which a development comes through, it doesn't hit the numbers, and then we're scrambling trying to find other sites. That's not what we're looking to do, and that's not what the process is intended to do. We want to be very realistic and conservative in this process and come up with something that the council knows is going to meet a long range guide for how we're providing housing over these next 8 years.
Great. Thank you both for clarifying that. That's all I have.
I have a few questions, but I would actually like to see, and we can take turns asking questions, but would somebody else like to jump in on a question, or would I be okay to go ahead?
We
I
have
have a question.
Councilmember Vandenberg.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I'm just curious, the Dry Creek Oaks project has been a kind of an on again, off again project. How would that affect our numbers?
That is a project that's building. There are components to that project that does include a commercial piece of property, as well as a higher density piece that can provide for apartments. And then you actually have the base project that is building right now, which is a senior housing project. And depending on what that density looks like, depending on what those sales numbers could look like, council member, it can definitely count as part of our numbers. We have a number of projects that are going to be building, whether it be Cedar Flat that you're going to hear tonight, Cardoza 2 on the horizon, even in the future with the Simmerhorn Ranch project. We have a number of projects that have been approved that haven't built that will help with our upcoming numbers.
Let me re-ask the question. That project started many years ago. It had a developer stop and quit, and it changed developers. And that's more of what I'm asking. If a project starts and it basically just stops, a new developer picks it up, how does that affect our numbers if it goes into multiple years?
If it's vacant property right now, we are able to count it in this upcoming cycle.
Okay. And what would define vacant? Because it was partially, the streets were partially made on that lot prior to change.
There's as part of your housing element, even though your planning period starts in May, the sixth cycle, you're actually able to count units as of July 1st of this year. If they have not pulled the building permit for the actual unit, then you can count it in this current housing element.
So for
The house
Dry
is
Creek
already under
Oaks,
construction.
yeah, for Dry Creek Oaks, it would be the whole project could count.
Okay. Thank you.
Was Mr. Lozano or Mr. Sandu next? I don't know which. Lozano, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I have a couple question. One thing, Craig, that housing element, you look at the general plan, right? And it looked like we need to be maybe identified more land on high density than low density.
Right now, we're still working on that data collection, but I'm estimating that we're going to have to come up with more land that meets higher density sites. Or maybe we can get creative and take a look. I know we do have some commercial properties that have a straight commercial designation. And if we take a look at potentially rezoning them to mixed use, and that mixed use designation does allow for multifamily housing, there might be a way to get some units there. But I think until we know specifically how many units that we have with vacant land in the city, it'll be hard to speculate how much more we're going to need. But my guess right now, we are going to need more. I can't tell you how much at this point in time.
Okay, and then my next question is, we said we just need to identify the land, but we does not need to build it. But my question is, as soon as you identify the land, if later on the developer or the owner will want to change, how are we going to do that?
If we identify that site to meet our housing numbers, you couldn't change that.
Oh,
You could potentially upzone it and put more units on it, but there are state laws that would say you can't lose those units unless you find another place for those units to go to.
So basically whatever we can be next 4 or 5 months, have we identified any piece of the land, and that land is just, you can build whatever we say until they have to go through the council is a different story, but you have to build sooner or later is the same high density, low density, or whatever we will decide on the identified that land, right?
That's correct. And that's what currently takes place. We do have a general plan. It identifies different densities for different properties, whether it be commercial, industrial, or residential. And you have to build the project that meets that designation unless you come to the council and get a general plan amendment or a rezone.
Thank you. And the next, my question is, I'm looking at the project schedule engagement. Can you might be a little bit explain, because on the schedule is going to planning, and also this is very important part of the outreach to the public. And we have a COVID-19. I just want to, make sure the May 15, we have to, something have to meet the deadline. So I just want to make sure this information go everywhere, council, planning, and the public. That's very important. And the schedule, can you might be wherever we can do outreach to public, how we gonna do outreach to public?
I think
Yes.
right now we do have this handout that is currently in English. It's going to be provided in Spanish. You know, one of my big concerns is with COVID and everything we're seeing, you know, we're doing a lot of things electronically, and that's great for people to have computers and that they can, you know, interact in this Zoom format. And we are starting to get a lot more people interacting in Zoom. You can do it from your home, and it's comfortable. But what I'm concerned about is the people that we aren't getting in touch with, that maybe don't have access to a computer, something like that. So we've been talking as staff, we're going to be getting these handouts, and we need to start getting those to various groups, and we're going to have to reach out to a lot of our service organizations. We need to get this document out to folks, and we need to do it. If it's walking door to door in certain areas, getting them out to apartment complexes, getting them out to the Grizzly Hollow project, getting them out to the mobile home parks, making sure that our senior community has them, or any community that doesn't have access to, you know, the Zoom format. We need to make sure that we're making sure this is as public of a process as we can. And I'm not going to say that there aren't challenges, because I hear it all the time. COVID has limited us in our ability to have gatherings and interact in that way. And we're just going to have to do the best we can.
No, I totally understand you in the department, you're doing the best effort, but I like to something if can, when we can give that information to the public, we have to have some kind of two-way information, not just if you feed the information, you feeding the information to the public and we don't get feedback from them. See something, you know, it's very hard. I know COVID everywhere is, but see whatever, you know, we can do the best. The only my concern, or I just like to be whatever the public say or what they want, get back to their information, bring back to the council.
The council has been very clear that they expect these processes to be very public, very transparent, and an ability to go back and forth as much as you can. And this document won't be successful if we don't have that dialogue, if we don't have that input through the community, and we need it.
And if I may, I just wanted to sort of pipe in here that Director Hoffman and I have been discussing various avenues where we can get this information out and get input. We have a number of service organizations that are conducting their monthly meetings via Zoom, and perhaps asking if we could have some time during those monthly meetings. So we're going to do our best to reach out to as many folks as we can and get as much input as we can, because this issue, as you all know, affects the entire city. So we need to get that input, and it's just the challenges are a little steeper now, but we'll figure out a way to communicate with folks.
Thank you, Mr. Hine. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. I know you guys doing a very hard work out there. Thank you.
Councilmember Lozano, do you have questions?
I don't. Yeah, I guess I do have a couple of questions and a couple of statements. My first of all, a statement would be, you know, this RENA change has been very disappointing, and I know from a regional's perspective. And I'm going to give you an example. There, and I don't know what the resolution is yet to this, but there was a question about one of the cities that are in the SAGCOG region of whether or not their university students could be counted, that housing could be counted toward their RENA numbers. And the state initially said no. And this is a community that probably half of their city residents are part of university housing. And so it's very, very strict. You know, I don't think it's been any secret from our governor that he has you know, he's made no secret that he has a very aggressive housing initiative, and that's what he is pushing. And so that's, I believe, why between the 5th and 6th cycle you see such a huge jump in our numbers And it's kind of, it's not real inviting. I'll tell you that. I will say this, and this is why I believe it's so important that as we have our meetings, we talk about low density or medium to low density or high density. We talk about that in the strictest forms, because medium to low density is different in the RENA numbers than low density or very low density. And so it's really, really important that we don't send a mixed signal to our community as we move forward, because it's going to be important that we do what we can to attain these numbers. And like I said, Governor Newsom's made it no secret that this is a priority to him, even through the COVID pandemic. The second question I have is there any, and it's kind of rhetorical, I guess, but is there any state funding attached to achieving the numbers, I should say? And I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking about. If I own a piece of property, or somebody owns a piece of property, and it's currently zoned for, above moderate, one of the higher income designations, and we want at some level to make it either low or very low. And I'm not suggesting that we do this, but I'm using this example as to get to my question of, is the state providing any funding to offset costs for people that are doing that as property owners or anything like that?
I don't know of that type of funding. All I would tell the council is, in the last 6 months, you've seen this with HCD providing us a $150,000 LEAP grant to help fund this activity. What you've seen tonight with the REAP funding coming actually from SACOG, $13,000 coming in this cycle, with another $65,000 coming next fiscal year. We're seeing a lot of money from the state. We're seeing a lot of money from the regional governments. We're seeing money for infill development. And I believe we're going to continue to see that. That's the trend. I know if we don't have a certified housing element, that money starts going away. But I don't know of anything particular that would say we get more money if we have a certified housing element. I would just say if we have a certified housing element, we're able to continue getting these grant monies. And there's a lot out there. And Councilmember Lozano, you being on COG, you're seeing them, you're telling staff these monies are out there. We're applying for these grants. And I think this is a trend that you're going to see over the next 10 years. These monies are going to be available. And the one point I want to make sure everyone's aware, not only the council member, but anyone who's watching, we have to do this work no matter what. So these activities, somebody has to pay for them. And if we're able to secure these grants, if we're able to have the state or regional monies pay for these activities, that means that's money that doesn't come out of the general fund, and the city can use those monies where it's needed. And we're going to continue going after these grant monies to pay for these state mandates. And I think that helps in the long run.
And I think that's awesome. I mean, we didn't sign up for this program. This, again, yet another state mandate that puts us in a bind, and in my opinion, but I know the good work will happen. I just want to make one last point. The city manager sent out today a couple of documents, one that outlined some resident housing permits from 2009 to 2021, and then development projects that were approved. And I appreciate the information, Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Hines. I just want to point out one thing, because you hear about projects that are being approved, and how many are already approved and how many will be built. I found it interesting that since the fiscal year 13-14, our city has approved about 3,400 total units, and it's broken down by fiscal year, and they did a really good job. And I just kind of briefly went through it and picked out what I believe is about 13 of those of the 21 total projects were infill, or appear to be infill projects, which is a good thing. But the most interesting piece to me is, and this kind of speaks to the housing element versus the build. From fiscal year 2013 to 14 to present, we have finalized 294 residential homes. That's an average of about 36 a year. And so when you look at what is approved and what is actually built, there's a big disparity. And I think that we'll see this with this housing element as well. It's just the culture of our city, and it's not, I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, but just to put it in a little bit of perspective, that we have a mandate to identify locations, but I don't know that any of it will ever be built, or if it will be, it'll be built at a snail's pace. And so I think we need to be real deliberate on how we go about this and make sure we get that community input, because 6 years down the road, somebody could come in with a proposal for a property, and we want to make sure that that's going to be the right thing for our community. So that's all I have, and I appreciate again the presentation, and I understand this is a informational item, but I appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Lozano. You all made very good points. Some of you asked questions that I had. Just wanted to kind of elaborate on a couple of them. I do share Rich's frustration that it's just, basically what this is people telling us how to grow and forcing us to do it, and then how we're going to do it. And for a city that doesn't really have a lot of real estate, so to speak, we are kind of landlocked on some aspects. It's frustrating, because what I'm afraid of is that we, designate certain properties to be certain densities. Let's say, I mean, I agree with Rich. I think the high density is going to be the most difficult. I mean, we haven't built an apartment complex, except for if you consider Galt Place with the senior complex, but we haven't built a apartment complex that's open to the public in probably 30 years. I think Trail Ridge is 30 years old or more. I mean, that's how difficult we all know it is to get someone to build an apartment complex here. I mean, you can't force someone to come in and build a complex. So if we designate, X amount of property, this is going to be high residential, we can't have anything but high residential or high density, in this particular places, whatever. What happens when we start building out, and then that's all the land we have left, and they're designated for those things? It could sit there forever. I mean, who's gonna come in and we got Parlin Oaks in queue, which is really the first real big, which is a project that I'm excited about, because I think there's a huge need for rentals in this town. A rental market in Galt is nearly non-existent, as our city manager will tell you. And so my concern is we allocate this land for certain densities, and then it just sits there, and then we come to a point maybe where we have some really good projects come forth, and we're like, sorry, we would love to have your project, but it doesn't meet the height, so we have to turn it away because there's just no available land. I mean, it is very frustrating. Vice Mayor Sandu asked, if we can, if you have a certain land use currently right now, if we have certain zoning in the general plan, and then somebody else comes along with a project and they say, well, this doesn't quite meet that rezoning, there's an option to come before the council, and the council could then change that zoning. But the way you're describing it, Craig, is we won't have that option to do that in some of these instances. And so they are kind of like locked in more or less with that. And free market is just, I mean, we can't, the funny thing is we're talking about low income and it's like, I don't care what the density is. I don't think any density you're going to build in Galt is going to be affordable to low income, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see an apartment that's going to be less than $1,500 a month. I don't care what it looks like. You're never going to see that, I don't think. And so, so I guess my questions, Craig, were what happens in that situation where we take our existing general plan and we revisit it as part of this housing element, and we say, okay, we're going to have to flip that to high density, and we're going to need some over here, and we designate and go through this whole process, and then it's locked in. And then what happens at that point? I mean, you want to answer maybe that question first before I go on?
We're required to have a wide range of housing, and it's not just high density, it's not just medium density, and it's not just low density. We're required to have a range of opportunities. And I think this council has made it very clear that as we're going through the process, that what sites we identify, it's going to be important. Don't want to get backed up that you limit any future opportunities. I hear that. And all I could say is we're going to go through this process. I don't know where we are right now. I don't know how far off we are. We have a lot of housing that has been identified. Again, the Eastview project, that project has low density housing. It's got medium density. It's got high density. The Dry Creek Oaks property has a very large high density site that hasn't been counted before. We do have a project that is up on Carillion. That's the Greenwood Cottages that is currently vacant, and we'll have to take a look at that. But I do understand your concerns. You don't want to be left in 30 years with just a bunch of high density sites. And that's not what we're looking to do. We want to make sure that we're meeting our state requirement, but that we're giving the community the flexibility to do things that make sense for the community of Galt. I mean, at the end of the day, if you get done with this process and it doesn't look like Galt, what have you done?
Well, and that's my fear. And we have forces at work here that are not of our control, that are forcing Galt to become something different. And it is very frustrating. Even those projects you named, though, like Parlin Oaks, Greenwood Cottages, and I think there's one other one that might fall into that higher density. I still concern. I think the number on that chart, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Rust, was like 400, over 400 that where we would need to be getting into this housing element. Is that correct?
As far as your low, very low is 404, and low income was 243.
So which one would be specifically like apartments? Would that be your low, your very low, or would it qualify for low as well?
It would be both of them. Yeah.
From
So
a
basically,
siting standpoint, we'd be looking to generate about 650 lower income units. That's adding the two together, and those would all be apartments typically.
Yeah, so we're going to need 650 apartments. So Parlin Oaks is like 80 or something like that. And I mean, we're not even scratching the surface. It's I don't even know how we're going to accomplish that. I guess, like you said, the good news is we only have to designate the land. But again, I worry, as Mr. Lozano said, he asked a very good question with where funding is out there. I mean, what incentive is there for a developer to come in and build such a project? Because clearly it's market driven what they build. What incentive is there for to drive that? I mean, they're going to have to come up with something at some point for us to be able to accomplish these things. It's like this thing is so unreachable, and it seems, and they expect us to meet it.
Well, the one thing I would say, when we start talking about apartments, when we start talking about higher density projects, I know it's you throw out the 640 number, but if you start looking and going, hey, what's an apartment complex? Is it coming in somewhere of a density of 20 to 25 units per acre? That's 32 acres. We can find 32 acres within the community of Galt to meet these numbers. It's not going to be so bad that it limits us. I'm just saying, I don't think we have that land designated right now, but I think we've got a lot of work cut out for us over the next couple months. One of one of the things I was most excited about this project is if there was a consulting company that we were going to get to come in and work on this project, it was Mintier Harnish. They know this community. They have a long-term history with us. They know the culture of this community, and they know the expectations. And we're going to work on this together, and we're going to make it happen. It's going to be a process.
So I have one last comment. Are we able to designate area in the sphere of influence, or does this have to be specifically in incorporated areas?
Rick?
We can designate areas out in the sphere, but that would have to go along with programs that would bring that into the city within that 8-year planning period, as well as support it being built within that 8-year planning period. So when you start to talk about an annexation, that just adds more time to your overall process, and whether you can achieve it in 8 years is a question mark.
I think that's going to be a policy call that the council ultimately has to make. But the first step is we really need to figure out where we are right now. And once we know that, then we can figure out where we need to be.
Agreed. So just one last comment, and this doesn't pertain exactly to Galt, but how do communities that are, I guess, for lack of a better word, affluent, that obviously are in California that are hit with such things, how do they adapt? I mean, you obviously have certain cities, we can all think of some that are, pretty affluent areas that don't have any such low income or high density housing. How do you even begin to do something with a city like that? I mean, Mr. Rest.
Mr. Mayor, there's a range of solutions. We're working in the town of Los Gatos right now, which is a very affluent town in the foothills of the San Francisco Bay. They're looking, in their case, a lot of infill development, what they call missing middle housing. So creating triplexes on existing single family home lots. We're working in the city of Carlsbad right now. They achieve a lot of their housing through accessory dwelling units, as well as they have an inclusionary housing component. Whereas if you build a new subdivision, you're required to build affordable housing with that subdivision. And the developers in that case probably subsidizing the cost of the unit. Then it's deed restricted for 50 years. So those are some broad tools. Accessory dwelling units are a hot topic to be used. And a lot of affluent communities are looking at what they can do to push down the size of units to get what they call micro units, prefab development. So you're actually talking about units that are in the 600 to 800 square foot range in order to drive affordability.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm sure those Los Gatos duplexes are going to be really affordable too.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
So I think a lot of my other questions I'm going to save, because I think they would be more better served at a later time when we start really diving into this thing. I just want to touch real quickly on what Vice Mayor Sandhu said about the public input. It is very challenging with COVID. I worry about the senior input, and I worry about the lower income and Hispanic that maybe are not so inclined to ever watch a council meeting, or and there's seniors that are not, tech savvy, that are not going to be able to jump on a Zoom or whatever. I think we got to figure out, we got to be very creative in how we're able to get input on those, from those demographics, I think. So again, so I guess that's all. I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to keep beating this subject up here. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Rust and Craig, for answering my questions. Does any of the council have any additional questions before I kind of wrap up this topic here?
Yeah, I have one last question.
Mr. Vandenberg.
The zoning, we have an 8-year cycle. Can we rezone after that 8-year cycle, or is that zoning for high density, let's say, is that permanent?
It would be,
you're required, if you're counting it towards your RENA number, you have to have that rezoning completed within 3 years of your housing element going forward. So in this case, by 2024.
But I think,
go ahead.
no, I was going to, what you're identifying is, so we identify all these sites, we get through our housing cycle, and it's a big number right now. The last, the 5th cycle, it was low. So what's going to happen in the 7th cycle? We don't know what that number is. What happens if that number actually goes down? Could you have a situation where you have a bunch of sites, they're vacant, you have a lower number, and you don't need those high density sites then? Could you potentially rezone those because you don't need them? You could to meet that new housing cycle.
Right. And I just want to make sure that as we vote, we should know that this zoning will be permanent, 10, 20, 30 years. Is that what they're saying? Or is it just for the 8-year cycle?
Well, it'd be needed for that housing element, but
Right.
if you're asking
if it doesn't get built, if let's say none of the homes or let's say half of the homes get built for that zoning cycle. Now we're at the end of the zoning cycle, we're starting a new cycle. Can we rezone as we see fit?
Depending on what our numbers are for the next cycle, we'll have to provide sites for that number. But again, if the number's not 1,900, and let's just say the next cycle is only 300, you could rezone properties that you didn't need to meet that cycle. Does that make sense?
Partially.
I would just say
the housing element doesn't take away the legislative authority of the council. You're obligated to designate the right number of locations for your housing. Per your question, if you get to your 7th cycle and you want to shift sites, this one's going to go to low density and you're going to make another site higher density to accomplish that, you have that ability.
Okay, because earlier you said once, you can't go down, you can make them smaller, but you can't make them larger in zoning. So we would, after the cycle, we would have that ability, potentially.
Yeah, you're going to redo your RENA number, your site analysis and all of that at that time, and you can accommodate that through a different solution.
Thank you.
To piggyback on the council member's question, what if we designated a spot for high density and then we met our arena requirement, and then within that 8 years we had a developer come along and said, I'd love to do a high density project, but I don't want to do it right there. Can I do it over here? Could we as a council flip flop zoning and exchange as long as we still met the number criteria?
Don't see any reason why not.
Okay.
You'd have to amend the housing element to take that site and move that site someplace else.
So it is fluid technically then. There is some latitude there with that. Okay.
As long as you're meeting your numbers.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to pipe in here, and I know Craig and Rick are the experts, but from my perspective, this housing element represents part of this confluence that we're in the middle of right now. And so whereas we've got to come up with housing solutions I'm sorry, I've got something flying around here. We've got to come up with housing solutions that the city and the citizens desire and they feel they need. At the same time, we're balancing the citizens' desire to grow at our own pace and at a pace that we're comfortable with. At the same time, we've got the state and their mandates. And so this is sort of the formula that we have to address. And so it will inform every developer that approaches us with a project. It will inform all of our activities going forward in the area of development. And so that's why it's important, and I've made this clear to Director Hoffman, that we need to know what those numbers are, because then we can start planning for the future. But I wanted you all to know that we still have a commitment to growing at our own pace and growing in a way that meets the needs of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Lozano, you had a further question?
Yeah, I'm a little confused now, and I apologize. Our Councilmember Vandenberg made a comment, and I just want to make sure I have it right in my mind. If we identify Lot A as low density, or yes, low density, and we decide that we don't want to identify any other property, there are no other pieces of land that we want to move that low density acreage to. We can only make it either low, we can only approve low density or very low on that piece of land. Is that what I'm understanding?
That would be what the general plan and current zoning does. That would be correct.
But as it relates to the RENA numbers, because we're going to have to identify 1,926 properties or dwelling units. And so if we choose not to, we've identified it, right? And like I said, property A is low density, and somebody comes and says, hey, we want to buy that piece of property, but we want moderate density on it. We couldn't do that unless we identified another piece of land that was low density to continue to meet our RENA numbers. Correct?
You may be using our terms a little,
Okay.
if you say low density, if we're trying to meet lower income.
Okay, that's what I'm going to say. Yes.
Right.
I'm looking at the RENA change chart. So
Yes.
low income, correct.
Low income. So if you were to lose that site, or it doesn't develop out to the extent that we took credit for in our RENA numbers, we would have to replace that somewhere in the community.
Yes.
Or we could make it very low, correct, to increase our number on that site so that we still match or meet our numbers. Can we do that?
As long as you're meeting the overall numbers, you can make those changes.
Okay.
And I mentioned a little earlier, we will provide you with a buffer. So if you'd like to, it'll be like your players on the bench. So other sites that you can pull into your analysis should you need to meet those. We'll pre-identify places that could be brought out in case something needs to change over time.
I just want to make sure that we're not, as we go through this process, that there's not an understanding that we're 100% locked into that particular site A is X. We can actually move site A's X to another site and put different numbers in site A.
As long as you find another site X as you're describing.
Right. Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Council member or Vice Mayor Sandu, I see your microphone's off. Did you have a comment or no, sir?
No.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. That was a great follow-up question because I think there was some misconfusion. So basically, and again, it sounds like what we're going to end up with is not so much looking at units. Units are going to equate to acreage. So once you figure out what very low and low income is going to equal per acre, how many dwellings, then we're going to basically come up with a formula saying, okay, we're going to roll out a map of Galt and say, okay, we need 34 acres here somewhere. We need 34 acres total somewhere that's going to be apartment complexes, for example. That's what's going to end up being, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, unless anybody has any further, Ms. Huber, did we ask for public comment on this item yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Ms. Roddicker, do we have any hands raised on this topic?
We do have one public comment from Jerry Sauter.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Sauter.
Hello, thank you for quick second to speak. I just wanted to add an ask with regard to the public comment. I appreciate the council members all speaking up about making sure we get good public comment. I would like to just ask that the input and the communication on this rather important issue be very clearly laid out to the impact of the citizens of Galt and how potential development in selected areas will pan out and timetables. My only concern is that we could run into a lot of the public confusion with some of the other master plans and things that have come up as of late. And I think a lot of that public concern could be avoided early on with just really good communication from city staff, not going out full long with a bunch of recommendations from the get-go, but really just communicating what the state's requirement is of us, what our options are, and how what's being proposed and selected would impact the community. And I think that's going to be really important, because we've had some stuff get put out into the community, and I think it's really gotten citizens whipped up into pretty high level of concern, when if the message was delivered a little bit more differently, there would have been more community support and understanding for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sauter.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional hands raised, Ms. Rediker?
We have no more. Oh, I take it back. We have one more. Izzy G. Go ahead, Izzy.
Bob Belay.
Mr. Ballier, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, council members, first of all, congratulations to the new members and congratulations to the new chairperson, and I mean the new mayor and the new vice mayor. I'm the chair of the Commission on Aging, and I thought I was going to fall asleep during the presentation, but it was pretty interesting, so I stayed awake. And so it kind of piqued my interest when you guys mentioned seniors, obviously, because that's something I'm concerned about, and I want to make sure that that in my role as advocating, in my commission's role as advocating for the elderly, I want to offer up to Director Hoffman specifically, and others, including Mr. Rust, to avail to stay in touch. I want to stay in touch with you guys on this matter in terms of the getting the word out to the seniors, because I happen to have communications with our 7 or 8 senior centers that we have here in Galt. That would be a good portion of the population that needs to get the leaflets or whatever information you have for them. And I can help facilitate getting that information to them. And we could even do well, I guess we can't do a face-to-face thing because of this silly COVID thingy. But anyhow, yeah, so I wanted to offer up my time and effort to Director, just promoted you, Dr. Hoffman, Director Hoffman and Mr. Rust. So if, is there a way, how can I get a hold of you so that like an email, so we can start communicating with each other?
Can I just give you my phone number, and you could, it's my direct line to my desk. It's
okay.
It's 366 and 7231. Please give me a call.
209?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's all the comment I have for now. I'm just waiting for the happy moment later on in this council, hopefully. So
thank you, Mr. Talk. Thank you, Mr. Ballier. Appreciate your assistance on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have any additional hands raised, Ms. Rediker?
That concludes our attendee side of public comment.
Ms. Huber, do we have any written comment?
No written comment.
Okay. Well, if that will conclude, if no council member has any further comment they would like to add, I would entertain a motion to receive the presentation.
Mr. Mayor, I think that because it's just a presentation, I don't think a vote or a motion of any kind is needed at this time.
Okay, I was under the impression that we did. You said recommended action, so.
Right, I saw that, and that's why I wanted to mention it to you.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir. Well, with that, then we'll go ahead and move on to our next item, which is going to be our Public Works Department, item H3, for those of you that are following along. Approval of the final map, subdivision improvement agreement, and development impact fee credit agreement for the Cedar Flats Estates, phase number 1. This will be presented by our Public Works Director, Mr. Mike Selling. Mr. Selling.
Thank you, Mayor Farmer, and good evening, council members. Mike Selling again, Public Works Director, and Bill Forrest is here, our senior engineer who oversees the development side of the department. He will make the presentation on this item. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bill, and then we'll be available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Bill Forrest, Senior Civil Engineer. The Cedar Flats Estates was first heard by the City Council and the Planning Commission in 2016, and it went back to Planning Commission for some extension of times, and then in the Planning Commission meeting of February, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong line. Actually, February 2020, Planning Commission granted the last extension of time, as well as finding substantial compliance with the prior approved tentative map. Cedar Flats Estates totals 112 single-family lots. Phase 1 is for 65 of those lots. The final map before you creates those 65 lots and some miscellaneous lettered lots. Some are for public purposes, such as Lot A, which is a stormwater detention basin, and some other lots are, for example, to be provide access to adjacent private properties. Associated with the final map is the subdivision improvement agreement. Your recommendation there is authorizing the city manager to execute the subdivision improvement agreement with TL Partners 11 LLP. Also before you is a recommendation authorizing Director of Public Works to execute and file what's called a development impact fee credit agreement. It is specifically for cost sharing in the bridge over the south tributary Dead Man's Gulch, connecting to Cedar Flat Avenue to the north. And then the last item is authorizing the Director of Public Works to execute particularly development impact fee credit agreements for any project in the future, in that we wouldn't need to bring that particular item back before council. With that, the credit agreement is against the traffic capital improvement program fees, street improvements that are collected at building permit. And unless the city council has any additional questions, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Forrest. Mr. Selling, do you have anything to add before I go to the council for questions?
No, I think Bill covered it pretty well. What I would say is typically a final map per the Subdivision Map Act. This is essentially, a straightforward approval. But really, we wanted to utilize this opportunity as kind of a chance to maybe educate, particularly with a couple of new council members about the process. So normally this would be a consent type item, but we wanted to take the opportunity to explain the process to the council and essentially to the community. So
thank you, Mr.
So could I also note, I think that Mike was going to note that there are a couple of technical changes and clarifications, particularly in the credit agreement. So when it gets approved, we would like it approved subject to minor clarifications and corrections approved by the city manager and the city attorney.
Okay.
And I think that's covered in the resolution. Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Harry.
That was going to be my question. Is it included in the language already? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Selling. Do we have any questions for Mr. Forrest or for Mr. Selling from the council?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One thing is free credit agreement. This is the credit we gave to the developer, or how? Can you a little bit more explanation on this?
Yeah, I can take a stab and Bill can jump in. Essentially, the way a fee credit agreement works is, as such in this case, like Bill said, this is primarily for a structure to cross the Dead Man's Gulch to connect Cedar Flats Avenue to the north. So what happens in this type of a case is the developer will build these improvements, construct these improvements, and then we will give them a credit against what their traffic impact fees would have been. So that's essentially how it works. So they're building something that that we need, that they need as well for their development. But anyway, there's there's benefit for the city as well in that road connection through that structure, and so they get credit for that towards what their fees would have been. And I don't know if Bill wants to add anything further.
Yeah, with the Cardoso 1 subdivision, we also entered into a development impact fee credit agreement in that particular case against the water capacity fees, in that the project did some water line improvements that were part mitigation for their impacts, but if you will, while they were making improvements to the benefit of the city water system on a whole. So the bridge across Dead Man's Gulch was identified in previous traffic capital improvement programs, and it's a benefit of providing increased circulation between the northeast area in particular to the rest of the city, and vice versa.
Yes, but Bill, my question is how that we share the cost, because that cost is usually with the city and developer is in particularly this case is 50%, and how you guys calculating on the credit?
Essentially, we kind of figure out what's their mitigation, if you will, their fair share component of an item. Usually that's identified in the case of street or traffic improvements in a traffic impact analysis. So it's a negotiated item. If we have some points of information of if things are of general benefit or of specific benefit to a project, then that's how we, for example, on the water line example that I mentioned previous, some part of that water line was their mitigation and some part was providing a benefit to the city.
I think in this case, Vice Mayor, as far as the traffic generation of this particular development, what's their fair share, like Bill was mentioning, versus what's the overall traffic circulation volume that we would that our modeling circulation element has projected for there. So if they're essentially triggering or generating half of the volume, that is how their fair share is determined.
Thank you. My other question is on the recommendation number 4, authorizing the Director of Public Works to execute any future development. I do understand we're going to accept the agreement, but any future development means we giving the authorized forever or forever, whatever future any project come in, or can you a little bit more explain?
Yeah, sure. So typically these things are pretty straightforward as far as, like we gave a couple of examples, whether it's traffic volume based or if it's, what's the development share of, say, a water line or some other, public works improvement. And so it's pretty straightforward as to, what the development share is versus what's the overall benefit. And so it's just kind of a to facilitate the process in terms of time frame. It's kind of a minor type of agreement that we can, like I said, there's a good quantifiable basis for what the split is. And so it's something, that can be done at the department level rather than, bringing it up to council. So again, it's just something to facilitate the process. If the council obviously, would rather have these come to the council, we can forego that and bring them to the council as they come up in the future. So either which way, but it was just something to kind of facilitate the process. So.
The other thing, the region, the department want to change is because due to the timing, or what was the reason behind it? Because this was not before the council. This is something we going to, as a council, going to give the authority. And what was the really reason? Because the timing, or what?
A little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. In this particular case, we were moving forward with an item, the final map for this subdivision. So, and in all honesty, I could have brought just the development impact fee credit agreement at an earlier stage. That would give them some certainty to the developer that, the monies were, codified, but there wasn't any particular rush. One reason, Mike is correct, it was solely proposed as a method of streamlining the process. If in the future, say there's a project that we enter into a credit agreement for, but there isn't any other items such as a final map before council, it was thought just as a method of streamlining to authorize the director of public works. But and previously, several years ago, the council had given authority to the director for a wide number of, if you will, standard items. So that was the thought behind it. Certainly, if the council wants to be able to review credit agreements, we can certainly bring those items back to the council for review.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. I don't have any question at this time.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Does anybody else have any comment on this subject? Other council members? I just had one. I did have some comments, but I think I'm going to hold off on them because I know we have a few more items to get to on the agenda. There were basically just some understanding of the map. Again, we don't have to go into in depth, but is it maybe just a simple answer? So currently, Amador Lane goes and before it curves and hooks into the street, I don't have the name offhand, but it actually continues as kind of a poorly paved rural road that will remain, and that branch or whatever house that's out there in the middle, that's going to actually remain as well. Am I correct, Bill?
The ranch, yes, that is what's referred to as a name pot's not part of the subdivision. The phase 2 of the development will improve Amador, and if you will, shorten that driveway extension. That driveway serves not only the ranch on the north side of the spur railroad tracks, but there's actually a property that has a private crossing to the of the railroad that gets the same access. So that improvement of Amador will be, if you will, done with the phase 2 of the Cedar Flats estates, and they're anticipating getting that. Right now, they're planning to get to it next spring.
So when you say improvement of Amador, because I noticed that you've actually created a new Amador that's actually disconnected from the current Amador, and it actually ends up with a dead end running north and south. So with the phase 2, that dead end, the new Amador will continue south and connect with the existing Amador. Is that?
Essentially, think of Amador taking a bend to head to the north.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that answered my question. I have some others, but I can always get with yourself or Mr. Selling just to get some clarification. They're just simple, just trying to understand the position of the map and connection points. So I'll save those for another time. Do we have? Did we ask for public comment on this item yet, Ms. Hubert?
Not yet.
Okay, Ms. Rodeker, do we have any hands raised?
We have no hands raised on the attendee side.
Thank you. And Ms. Hubert, do we have any written comment?
No written public comments.
Okay. Well, with no comment, and if none of my other fellow council members have any further comments on this item, I would like to get a resolution. Tina, do you want me to read the action that needs, or what do you want to do?
I can read it or you can read it. It's your choice.
I'll go ahead and read it. So what we're going to need to do is adopt a resolution for number 1, approving the final map for Cedar Flats Estates Phase 1 and authorizing the filing and recordation thereof. Number 2, authorizing the city manager to execute the subdivision improvement agreement, including the conditions of the approval with TL Partners X1 LLP and filing and recordation thereof. Number 3, authorizing the Director of Public Works to execute a development impact fee credit agreement with TL Partners XI LLP and filing thereof. And number 4, authorizing the Director of Public Works to execute any further development impact fee credit agreements and the filing thereof. Do I hear a motion to move this forward?
Moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Lozano, seconded by Vice Mayor Sandu. Could I have a roll call vote, Ms. Hubert?
Vice Mayor Sandu,
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau,
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano,
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forrest. Thank you, Mr. Selling. Moving on to our next item, actually will be Mr. Selling will need to stick around. Number H4, subject is the Consumnes Subbasin Groundwater Management Update. Mr. Selling.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And again, Mike Selling, Public Works Director. Yeah, and basically what I wanted to take you through tonight, something we've been working on for a number of years already, and give you an update. So first I'll give you a background on where we've been and why, and then where we're going. So basically this is for the Consumnes Subbasin, which is the sole source of water for the city of Galt. 100% of our water comes from that. So a little bit of background. In 2014, the state passed legislation that requires all groundwater basins to develop a groundwater sustainability plan, which we refer to as GSP. There's a lot of acronyms in this, so I apologize, and feel free to stop me or ask questions afterwards to clarify anything. So anyway, the GSP is what we're required to prepare. And the Department of Water Resources, which is referred to as DWR, has the oversight responsibility and categorize the basins on the amount of overdraft, which is the amount of water that's being taken out, which exceeds the amount of water flowing back in or recharging the basin. The Consumnes Subbasin, again, Galt sole water source, is classified as medium priority by DWR, and it has an estimated net overdraft of 10,000 acre feet per year. And an acre foot is, if you can simply imagine, a 1 acre plot of land if it had a foot of water on top of it. So that's what an acre foot is. So consequently, our GSP, our plan, is due in January next year, 2022. The GSP must show sustainability, which is no net overdraft of the basin by 2042, meaning that essentially the basin is either increasing in the water volume or it's staying static, if you will. It's not depleting. Obviously, local management is preferred over state management. And to that end, Galt became a Groundwater Sustainability Agency, another acronym, GSA, in 2017, and is working with 6 other GSAs to complete the GSP, the plan. As noted on the slide, we've had 2 framework agreements approved by Council to support these efforts. And I'm happy to report that we have very good working relationships amongst the group. Next slide, please. So this is a map of the basin, and basically it's color coded by the various 7 GSAs, or groundwater sustainability agencies. For Galt, you can see kind of toward the lower left is the pink area, and then you can see the other agencies. The purple on the far right is Amador County, actually, Groundwater Management Agency. So the basin extends into another county. The rest of it is in Sacramento County, and you can see the other GSAs, Slough House Resource Conservation District in the kind of orange color, Clay Water District kind of in the center in the light blue, Galt Irrigation District, which is in the green and primarily surrounds the city. And then up toward the top is Omichumney Hartwell Water District, which is kind of in that, I don't know if you want to call that a lighter pink maybe. And then you've got Sacramento County, which is kind of to the west and north of the city. That's the hatched area. And I think I got them all with that. So, so essentially what I also want to point out on this map is for the city of Galt, and it's kind of hard to see on this because it's kind of small, but our area will be changing due to the annexations that we've had, i.e. the industrial annexation that we had to the west of the city a couple years ago, I think. The Summerfield annexation for that development just north of Twin Cities Road there, kind of the northeast area of the city. And then the Notch annexation and the Island one, which was the most recent annexation. Next slide, please. So I already touched on the first couple of bullet points here, but just to reiterate, the Cosumnes Subbasin is considered medium priority by the state. And so we have 20 years to achieve sustainability through our plan that's due next year. Since the subbasin is overdrafted about 10,000 acre-feet annually, the plan needs to show how the collective GSAs, i.e. the 7 agencies, will eliminate the overdraft through projects and conservation measures, or what we call management actions. On the projects and conservation measures or management actions, the plan needs to specify how they will work, quantify the amount of recharge or conservation each is anticipated to achieve, and provide a time frame for each one of those projects or management actions. Obviously, some projects will take some time, probably a few years to go through the planning process, and then also may take some additional time to secure full funding. As noted, the city's share is relatively small compared to some of the ag entities. However, the state looks at each basin as a whole. So we kind of sink or swim, as a group. So it's important that we work together with the other GSAs and coordinate our efforts. Next slide, please. So some of the key issues that we're working on as far as other issues include governance. That is, how will the basin be managed? The group is currently anticipating some form of a joint powers agreement that will have equal representation amongst the 7 GSAs. And there may need to be some weighting of the structure to ensure the balance of power, so to speak. Whatever form is ultimately agreed to, the major decisions will be the implementation of the projects to achieve the sustainability and the ongoing basin monitoring and reporting. Funding is the other major issue. Things like how projects and management or the conservation actions and ongoing administration and monitoring will be paid for. Sacramento County has recently offered to take the lead to establish a fee program. The city has the option to participate in the county's program because the city, we are a separate entity, or we can do something on our own. There's no commitments yet. We are currently discussing alternatives on how the county's proposed program would be structured, and it seems likely that there will need to be some hybrid approach where every parcel or landowner will pay a small portion of the fee, essentially that they are receiving some benefit from the management of the basin, And then there will also be the larger component of it will be a portion based on the amount of water extracted from the basin or pumped. So we'll be working with our legal to address any potential legal concerns or issues in relation to that. Next slide, please. So some of the next steps, first of all, to confirm the projects and management actions list. This is something that will be done at the staff level. And we've got a draft list now that we're working on. So we'll be working to refine that. And then we can have the consultant that's assisting the agencies on this effort kind of crank the numbers, if you will, what the anticipated estimated cost would be for some of those projects and management actions. Would be the key thing that will, obviously play into what the fee structure is and what how much the fees would be. And that is something that we at the staff level are, tasked to complete by next month. And then the second item I have listed on here is to complete the boundary changes. As I mentioned before with our annexations, that they affect 3 other agencies, and those are the Galt Irrigation District, the Slough House Resource Conservation District, and the County of Sacramento. And the good news I have to report there is essentially the County of Sacramento some weeks ago, basically didn't need any kind of a document or a memorandum of understanding or agreement. They were fine to go ahead and process the boundary changes that affected them with DWR. And so the way that process works is essentially whoever is relinquishing a portion of their area has to make DWR aware first, essentially that they are consensual to that. And then the agency who is now taking over that area then has the second piece to basically confirm that yes, they are taking over that area. And that way DWR knows that there's no contentiousness in the boundary change. And so the good news there is just last Wednesday for the other 2, which both wanted memorandums of understanding, and I worked with our city attorney to draft that. Slough House Resource Conservation District Board approved the memorandum of understanding for the acreage that will be coming to the city from them last week. And then just today, I went out to the Galt Irrigation District's board meeting where they approved their respective portion for the boundary change. So they'll be submitting those to DWR, and then once DWR reviews those, then we will be submitting for our part on those. And so I had on here that those were, I was hoping to bring those in February. I think the good news there is that I can bring those in January now on the 19th meeting for both the Galt Irrigation District and the Slough House District. And then further next steps are to establish the governance mechanism. That's going to be later this spring, early summer. That will definitely be a key piece. That would be the JPA or whatever form that governance document may take. I would anticipate bringing that probably sometime in May to the council for its consideration. And then the last piece would be determining the funding mechanism, whether we go with the county's proposed fee program or if we do something, on our own. That's going to be, again, probably early to midsummer. Essentially, the deadline there would be, I think it has to be submitted to the county for any tax roll, to be added to the tax rolls by August. So next slide, please. And then I want to touch on this slide will kind of show you these boundary changes that I was just speaking of. So what you can see on kind of the blow up here is that the Galt Irrigation District, or GID, with the city from the annexations there, you can see the 3 pieces. Kind of hard to see those red numbers in there, but anyway, they total a little over 810 acres. And then Slough House Resource Conservation District, kind of that peach orangish color. The annexations there affecting them to the tune of about 336 acres. That's the Notch annexation. And then the last one, Sac County, there's about just under 50 acres there between the island annexation. And then there's another 10 acres over near the golf course, which we both agreed that it didn't make a whole lot of sense for them to have this little tiny 10-acre piece over there all by its lonesome. So, and next slide, please. So with that, that's kind of where we've been and where we are and where we're going. And I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Selling. Do I have any comments by council members on this item? All right, I myself do not have any questions at this time. Thank you for the good presentation. Do we have any hands raised for public comment, Ms. Rodeker?
We currently do not have any hands raised.
Thank you. Do we have any written comment, Ms. Hubert?
No written comments.
Okay. Since we have no public comment and no further comments by council, we will not need any action taken on this. This is for our presentation only. So I will move forward. Again, thank you for your presentation, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very well done as usual. Letter I, communication. Do we have any communication tonight, Ms. Hubert?
Not this evening.
Thank you. We'll move on to item J, City Clerk's report. Item J1, subject, consideration of appointment of representation to City Council committees, commissions, and boards. Ms. Hubert.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As mentioned, tonight we'll be considering appointments of representation to City Council committees, commissions, and boards. The Galt Municipal Code established the process by which a person is appointed to each committee, commissioner, board. Each council member shall appoint one person whose term shall run concurrently with that of the council member so appointing. As a result of the reorganization, or better known as the election, Councilmember Vandenberg and Councilmember Papineau each have appointments. Mayor Farmer also has an appointment on the Public Safety Committee due to the resignation of Darren Mitchell. Vice Mayor Sandu has one appointment to the Beautification Committee due to the resignation of Tiffany Manning, and Councilmember Lozano has one appointment on the Planning Commission due to the reorganization of City Council. So I'm going to go through each committee, commission individually, ask for your appointment. It is an individual appointment, and then we'll go to Historical Preservation Committee and the Sacramento Yellow Mosquito District last, because they will need council approval. So the first up is Beautification Committee. Councilmember Vandenberg and Councilmember Papineau each have an appointment. Vice Mayor Sandu has an appointment, as mentioned, due to resignation. So for the 3 vacancies, we have received one application from Paige Lampson. So Councilmember Vandenberg, do you have an appointment?
Yeah, I would like to appoint Paige Lampson.
Okay. Okay, so what we'll do is Councilmember Vandenberg appointed Paige Lampson, so we will continue to advertise for the remaining 2 positions. Next is Commission on Aging. The agenda report erroneously stated 4 vacancies at the top. However, there were only 2 vacancies, Councilmember Vandenberg and Councilmember Papineau. On December 9th, Sherilyn Kahn submitted her resignation as she is moving to a different city. So now Councilmember Lozano also has an appointment. So with our 3 vacancies, we did receive 2 applications, one from Robert Ballier and one from Andrea Johnson. Councilmember Vandenberg, do you have an appointment?
Yeah, I spoke with Andrea Johnson. I'd like to appoint her.
Councilmember Papineau?
Yes, I know Mr. Ballier's reputation well, and I would like to appoint him.
Okay, and Councilmember Lozano will continue to advertise for your appointment. The Galt Youth Commission has 2 vacancies. Councilmember Vandenberg and Councilmember Papineau each have an appointment. The applicants are Michael Hodge and Paige Lampson. Councilmember Vandenberg, do you have an appointment?
I'm sorry, what was for which one?
Galt Youth Commission.
Yeah, I'd like to appoint Paige Lampson as well.
And Councilmember Papineau?
I'd like to appoint Mr. Hodge.
Okay. Parks and Recreation Commission, two vacancies, Councilmember Vandenberg and Councilmember Papineau. We have received 3 applications from Chris J. Smith, John Jed McNamara, and Jeff Hood. Councilmember Vandenberg.
I'd like to appoint Chris Smith.
And Councilmember Papineau.
Yes, I'd like to appoint John McNamara.
Okay. So next is the Planning Commission. Councilmember Vandenberg and Councilmember Papineau each have an appointment, and Councilmember Lozano has an appointment due to the reorganization. So we have 3 vacancies. The applications received are from Keith Jones, Eugene Davenport, Jonathan Oshalim, and Jeff Hood. Councilmember Vandenberg.
I'm not going to make an appointment at this time.
Okay, so you're passing. Councilmember Papineau.
Yeah, I'd like to appoint Keith Jones to continue on the Planning Commission.
Councilmember Lozano.
I'd like to appoint Jeff Hood to the Planning Commission.
Okay, so we have Councilmember Papineau with Keith Jones, Councilmember Lozano with Jeff Hood, and Councilmember Vandenberg. We will continue to advertise. Public Safety Committee, Councilmember Vandenberg, Councilmember Papineau, and Mayor Farmer each have appointments. So there are 3 vacancies. The applications received are from Brian Schaaf, Jamie Cates, and Timothy Reed. Councilmember Vandenberg.
I would like to appoint Brian Schaaf. I believe I have that right.
Councilmember Papineau.
I'd like to appoint Jamie Cates.
And Mayor Farmer.
Hang on a second. What's the third name? I was going to appoint Jamie, but that's fine. They're all getting appointed. I would like to. What's the last applicant? I don't have it in front of me.
Timothy Reed.
Timothy Reed. That's right. Yes, I am familiar with Timothy Reed, and I think he would be a great asset. I would like to appoint him.
Okay. Okay, so now we are going to the appointments by City Council. So the next is Historical Preservation Advisory Committee. We do have 5 vacancies. We have received 2 applications, one from Ida Denier and Jeff Joliffe, pardon me if I misspoke. So we can take a motion to appoint those 2 and keep advertising, but it is a council decision.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint those 2 to the 2022 term ending.
Second. Tina, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Vice Mayor Sandu.
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau.
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano. Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and then the last one for council approval is Sacramento Yellow Mosquito and Vector Control District, and Marcia Mooney is resubmitting her application.
How many empty seats do we have on that?
1.
And we have 1 applicant, her, Miss Marcia, what's the name?
Mooney.
Miss Marcia Mooney. And this is a appointment as the entire council, correct?
Correct.
Okay, do I hear a motion to appoint?
Miss Mooney.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Papineau, seconded by Councilmember Lozano. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu.
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau.
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano.
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Excuse me. Do we need to ask for public comment on this item, Ms. Hubert?
Yes.
Okay, do we have any hands raised, Ms. Rodiker?
Do have a hand raised. It's Mr. Bellier.
Sure, Mr. Balliet, go ahead.
Mr. Bellier, go ahead. Unmute your mic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Kevin. I'm having a hard time with your last name. Forgive me for that. And, I will, of course, continue to work hard to advocate for the elderly in the city of Galt. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. And I think I'll retire at 78. I'm 74 now. So I think this 4-year thing might be due. Who knows what's going to happen in 4 years. Anyway, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I'm very honored by your appointment. Thank you.
Thanks for serving.
Thank you, Mr. Bellier. And thank you for continuing to serve. You're a great asset to that commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hubert, do we have any written comments?
No written comments.
And no further hands raised, Ms. Rodiker?
That is correct.
Okay. Do I have any comments from council on this item before we move on? All right, with no further comment, we will now move on to our last item, the regular calendar, item J2, subject review city council appointments to regional boards, commissions, and committees. Ms. Hubert.
Okay, so again tonight, we are going to review council appointments to regional boards, commissions, and committees, and consider taking the following actions. To fill vacancies, again, due to the reorganization on the Cosumnes Community Services District, or known as CSD 2x2, the 457 Deferred Compensation Plan Committee, the City and Schools Together, or CAST, Galt Youth Commission, Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District, the Sacramento Metropolitan Cable Television Commission, and the South Sacramento Conservation Agency. We'll also consider filling any assignments where city council members desire to be removed from a current position, and consider making any other changes to assignments as desired by city council. So I'm just going to go line by line on the master roster, which was attached to your agenda report. It gives a brief description of the meeting along with the meeting times. So the first opening, Cosumnes Community Services District, the 2x2, we have 2 vacant positions.
I'd like to be a part of that if I could.
Yes, Mr. Lozano. Anybody else would like to join him on that?
I would like to part of that if everybody agree.
Vice Mayor Lozano and Councilor Lozano, Vice Mayor Sandu and Councilor Lozano. Thank you.
Okay. Next is the 457 Deferred Compensation Plan Committee, and there is 1 vacant position.
Would anybody be interested in serving on this?
I noticed there's no meeting times on those 2 items.
The CSD 2x2 meets quarterly on the 3rd Thursday of the month at 3:30 p.m. And it looks like, and Stephanie can talk more, but we have meets at least annually to review the statement.
Yeah, so based on the deferred compensation plan charter that I found, which was signed back in 2014, the committee is supposed to meet on an annual basis to review the investment plan performance. The committee itself is comprised of the city manager, who is the chairperson, the city attorney, the finance director, the HR director, and then 1 city council member.
Would you like to serve on that, Mr. Vandenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Van Stein.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Cities and Schools Together, also known as CAST. We have 2 vacant positions and the alternate Sean Farmer.
I would like to move into the priority position on that if the rest of the council is okay with that, and then let somebody else be the alternate.
I'd like to be the alternate. I'm fine with you taking the primary on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Papineau.
And we actually have 2 primary, so if anyone's interested, we have 1 more primary.
I could actually go as the second primary then.
Okay.
Yes.
And then an alternate.
I'll fill the alternate.
Okay. And then next is 1 vacant position for the Galt Youth Commission.
How often does the Youth Commission meet?
The first Monday of every month at 6 p.m.
If no one else would like that, I would take that unless someone would like it. I don't want to cut in front of somebody. Okay, then I will be fine with taking that one as well.
Okay.
I will do the alternate if nobody else wants the alternate.
We don't have, there is no alternate for the Youth Commission.
Would you, Vice Mayor of Sandu, would you like to have that position? I don't want to take it from you if you desire it.
No, that's fine, Sean.
Okay.
Can we make an alternate?
It would have to come back as a separate item, I believe.
That's a good idea, Councilman Lozano. Maybe we'll bring that up in council comments. That would be great.
Okay, Public Safety Committee. Right now we have Sean Farmer and Paul Sandu.
Mine.
I'm fine with continuing with that as well.
Okay, next are the outside agencies. Just going down the list, we have City Selection Committee that is concurrent with the mayoral term. So that is Mayor Farmer. We have the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. Right now, the city manager is the city's voting representative. We have Sacramento Area Council of Governments, known as SAGHOG, and right now we have Rich Lozano, and the alternate is Sean Farmer.
I'd like to continue as the primary on SACOG.
And I'm fine with continuing with the Library Authority.
Are you okay with being the alternate on SAGHOG?
Unless somebody else would like to. I mean, I never have had the opportunity to fill in the role. I know it's probably the most prestigious committee to fill on. I would like to extend that to either Mr. Papineau or Mr. Vandenberg, should one of them be interested in that. Okay, if not, then I will be fine with just keeping it.
Yeah, no, I'd be willing to step in as the alternate.
Okay, great. That'd be fine.
Okay, next we have the Sacramento County Criminal Justice Cabinet, and right now the Chief of Police is the representative. Sacramento Local Area Formation Commission, known as LAFCO. We are on a rotating schedule, so City of Galt will not see it till December of 2022. And Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District, we have 1 vacant and 1 alternate position available.
I'd like to take the primary on that one.
Okay.
And I could do the alternate.
To clarify, is that for the air quality? Is that for the
Air quality. Air quality.
Okay.
So we have Councilmember Papineau and Councilmember Vandenberg as the alternate.
Yes.
Okay, and then we have the Sacramento Metropolitan Cable Television Commission. This is a rotating seat with the City of Galt and Rancho Cordova. So the appointment would need to approval of both cities. So do I have a volunteer for that? Rancho Cordova's appointment just ended November 2020.
So can you please clarify what the commitment is on that?
That is quarterly, In March, June, September, and December on the first Thursday at 2:30 p.m.
Is anyone interested in taking this?
I am.
Mr. Vandenberg, thank you.
Okay, next we have Sacramento Public Library Authority, and we have Sean Farmer.
I would like to continue with that. I enjoy that.
Okay. And then Sacramento Transportation Authority, we have Paul Sandu and alternate Sean Farmer.
I will keep that.
Would someone like to take over the alternate? If not, I will be happy to take it. Just wanted to offer that up to someone else. Okay, I'll continue to be the alternate on that as well. Thank you.
Okay, and then we have the South Sacramento Conservation Agency, both one vacant and one alternate vacant position.
I'm sorry, can you repeat it again, Ms. Hubert?
It is the South Sacramento Conservation Agency. They meet the last Monday of the month at 11:30 a.m.
Okay. Is anyone interested in that?
I will take if nobody else in interest.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Anyone interested in the alternate or come
I will do the alternate.
Okay. Okay, and then we would just need a motion to pass what you guys just decided.
I think we skipped over the Homeless Policy Council.
Oh, you're correct. We have Sean Farmer. Thank you.
Yeah, I have yet to have a meeting on that yet. I was kind of interested in that, but we have yet to meet. So I'm open. If someone finds it interesting to do so, someone can take it, or I will continue. If anybody's interested, please speak up. All right, then I am fine to continue on that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
And Tina, if you could, what would be very helpful at some point in the near future, if you could maybe send each of the council members their assignments and just in clarifying when those meetings take place typically, that would be very helpful for each of us.
Thank you.
At your convenience.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first.
It's moved by Councilmember Lozano, seconded by Mayor Farmer.
Thank you.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu?
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau?
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano?
Aye.
Mayor Farmer?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. If we have, actually, we need to take public comment on this. Do we have any hands raised, Rose?
We have no public comments on the attendee side.
And any written comments, Ms. Hubert?
No written comments.
Okay, thank you. With no further comment, if I have no further comments by any council members, please put a hand up if you do. Otherwise, we will move on to our next item, item K, comments by staff. I will now turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Hines.
Good evening, everyone. I don't have any comments other than to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday. And I'm going to turn it over to the staff, and let's start with Finance Director Claire Tyson.
Good evening, everyone. I really have nothing to report except to wish everybody a pleasant holiday. It's going to be very different, I'm sure, for all of us, but hopefully it'll be a safe one. Thank you.
Interim Police Chief Brian Kalinowski.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to welcome the 2 new council members to the City Council. We had an outstanding turnout this season for our toy drive with Consume This Fire. We have nearly 420 deserving youth who are going to receive gifts from the Fire and Police Department this Sunday. And I want to thank the mayor and his family for their efforts last weekend, or the weekend before, excuse me, where we had nearly, and Sean may comment on this, so I apologize, but nearly 100 participants bringing gifts in multiple loads for our youth. So overwhelming response, and we do appreciate it. The police department has begun planning for Black History Month in February, and we have some exciting ideas that we're going to bring forward on social media in light of the COVID restrictions. And so we continue to work on that during this next month. Thank you.
All right, Public Works Director Mike Selling.
Thank you, City Manager. Yeah, a couple things to report. Some good news. Probably about a year ago, some folks may remember we were notified by the consulting firm that provided the water meter service data. They would gather the data and process it and give it to our finance department for their billing. We were given pretty much no notice that they were going out of business. So we were scrambling to find an alternate service provider, which we did. And I'm happy to report that they've got the system pretty much up and running now. And the last few weeks, we've been contacting folks that have had abnormal, what we call abnormal consumption rates, meaning this is many times higher than what their normal amount of water use would be. And things like broken pipes, broken sprinklers, leaving a hose on even, or leaking toilets. And so we've had some very happy customers, constituents that we were able to assist them in stopping those water leaks and conserving our water, and also saving them some money. So that's been definitely a plus. The capabilities of the new software are definitely helping us to improve the water conservation and identify these leaks. And so we're just kind of moving down the list. So if nothing else, if you get a leak letter, by all means contact us. We'll work with you to try to get those leaks taken care of. And then on the Hochschild property, which the council approved a contract for, I think it was probably 3 or 4 meetings ago. I'm happy to report the contractor has made very good progress on that, and I think they're nearing completion. The recent rains have kind of put a damper on wrapping things up, but those improvements are mostly complete, and we're hoping with maybe a weather window that they can finish the striping and whatnot that they have to do out there. So that's almost done. And then just to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy and safe holiday season. Thank you.
Human Resources Director Stephanie Van Stein.
Yes, good evening, Council. No updates this evening, but I do want to mention for anyone looking for employment, we do have a few job openings posted on our Human Resources webpage. Full-time position, we are still searching for police dispatcher candidates. For part-time or temporary positions, we're looking to fill recreation workers, level 1 or 2, parks worker, and also public works maintenance worker 1 or 2. So if you know of anyone who's interested, please direct them to our website. Thank you.
All right, Community Development Director Craig Hoffman.
Nothing further tonight. Everyone have a safe and festive holiday season. Thank you all.
Right. Economic Development Manager Amy Mendez.
Good evening. Just wanted to touch on a couple of things really quick. One, I know that Armando's not here this evening, the Parks and Rec Director, but the state did release the outdoor and indoor youth and recreational adult sports guidance yesterday. And so there's finally some guidelines in place for recreational youth sports. So hopefully we can begin to at least plan for some type of recreational activities as it relates to our sports leagues as we move into the spring. So that's great news for us. And really just in general, I think the sports leagues have been clamoring for some guidance from the state, and those were finally released. So I think that's a great step in the right direction as it relates to our youth and the sports and recreation activities that we can offer. So I'll let Armando run with that once he's back. And then also in regards to the small businesses, we've continued to push information out to our small businesses in regards to programs that are available, resources that are available. Granted, they're limited. There is information out there and guidance as it relates to the Small Business Development Center and loans that are available, which really don't help a lot of our businesses who already don't want to take on any additional debt, but trying to make sure that our businesses are aware of what's available. And so I did release a newsletter last week with some resources and different guidance for our businesses. The governor on November 30th announced a small business COVID relief grant program. And unfortunately, there's not any parameters to that yet, but there's $500 million that's been dedicated to that grant program, and the grants are up to $25,000. And so been following that. Hopefully by beginning of January, we'll have some information on the parameters and application guidance for that. So I've had several phone calls from folks who obviously aren't really interested in the loan programs, but would benefit on the grant side. So we are monitoring that and continue to push information out to our businesses as it relates to some of those resources that are trickling in. And I do appreciate, Mayor Farmer, your recommendation on the letter. I think anything that we can show our businesses that we're at least attempting to try and help them is beneficial, and it shows them that we care. And I do continue to try and push information out as it relates to the Eat, Drink, Support Local campaign, engaging our businesses, making sure that our residents understand the impact. And, today I posted about the fact that, we had so many businesses that in the light of COVID and the restrictions and indoor dining issues that, they aren't allowed to, push out as it relates to the indoor guidance, they still show up. They still are donating cookies and donuts and hot chocolate, and they come to all of our events and they participate, and it's huge. And I think that our community members and our residents need to understand the impact that they have on our community as a whole, because a lot of these events wouldn't be possible without them. So, that's information that we continue to try to push out to the community and hopefully resonates with them so that they continue to order takeout and patronize these businesses as we move through this continued kind of mess as it relates to COVID and the regulations and restrictions that are being put on these small businesses. So with that, I think that's all that I have for this evening, unless there's questions.
And so let's go with, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Who is that? Oh my, all right. Let's go with Harriet.
I have nothing to add except to send season's greetings from Kimberly and myself, and I hope you all have good holidays.
Very good. City Clerk Tina Hubert.
Just like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, since we won't see you.
All right. And Rose Rodacker.
I have nothing tonight.
Okay.
I wish everyone a happy holidays.
All right. Mr. Mayor, that concludes staff comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. I do have a question. Were we going to mention about the January 5th meeting was that meeting canceled, I believe?
Well, we can always state that it was in the on the consent agenda tonight. There was an item that canceled the January 5th meeting of the council. And so the next meeting of the council will be January 19th. And so we will we'll have one council meeting that we will not have in January. And then we'll come back January 19th and start the business at that point.
Thank you. And thank you for, I forgot that it was on the consent. So thank you for that.
Sure.
And thank you, staff, for all your wishes, your well wishes for the holiday season. We'll go ahead and take council comments at this time. Future agenda items. We'll start with our Vice Mayor, Mr. Sandhu.
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank you, South County Service. They provide last week for a senior lunch. I really like to thank you, Craig Morrison. He invited me, but I was another event. Thank you, Craig. The next one, Galt Sunrise Rotary Club. They're making every effort to get any kind of donation because they're going to provide almost 1,000 people Christmas dinner box. So thank you for Galt Sunrise Rotary Club, especially Mukesh Patel, Mark, Edward King. Thank you for your every effort to make that happen. I also like to thank you, Chamber. Chamber helping every small business the way whatever they can. Thank you for all the Chamber member. The last, Merry Christmas and Happy Christmas. Happy holiday. Stay safe. That's it.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Papineau.
Take a minute to compliment the professionalism of City Manager, Mr. Hines, and all of the staff that I've dealt with thus far. And wish everybody a Merry Christmas and looking forward to working with everybody in 2021.
Thank you, Councilmember Papineau. Councilmember Vandenberg.
Merry Christmas, everybody. I just want to thank you, Amy, for your comments. I appreciate you saying those things. To the Galt Rotary Club, you know, we could still donate, and even if you have extra freezer space, they could probably even use that for the frozen turkeys for a day or two if you so do have the space. And I'd like to thank all the people that applied for commissions and boards. It's good to see that people are involved and want to do good for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vandenberg. Councilmember Lozano.
Yeah, I will be brief. I did want to bring back up whether or not the balance that my colleagues want to entertain having an alternate for the Youth Commission. I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't know that we've had to use one in the past or we would have had the need to, but I think it just gives another opportunity for somebody else to be connected in a different capacity. So I'd like to bring that back later if everybody's agreeable at a later agenda when the city manager and mayor feel it is appropriate, because it's not a rush item.
I would support that.
Okay, and then just lastly, thank you all for everything that's been going on in the community in terms of the community events that we've been involved with in the city and hosted as the city, and the toy drives and all of those things that have been happening. I apologize to everybody. I've been a little under the weather the last couple of weeks, and I've not wanted to get anyone ill. And so I've been staying away, but I appreciate the work everyone's doing and continues to do. I want to give a shout out to the police department and of course, Mayor Farmer and the Casimas Fire Department for the toy drive. And I know there's going to be a distribution on Sunday, and don't know if I'll quite make that, but I'm going to try. But thank you all for everything you do for our families and our communities. And certainly the Sunrise Rotary for what they're doing to preserve our community dinner. So lastly, just happy holidays, whatever you celebrate during this time of year. Have a good one, and Happy New Year to everyone. As Vice Mayor Sandhu says, everybody stay safe and take care of each other, because it's an important time to be with family as best we can. So thank you, and have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you, Councilmember Lozano. I have a few things to say. First off, I do want to also thank the South County Services for providing again another year a great meal. I want to thank all of those that participated, all the volunteers, our city manager Lorenzo Hines. We had our Lieutenant Small and our interim chief Kalinowski were present. And all of those that were part of that. There's just so many names I can't begin to name them all, but you know who they are. And thank you for making that a very successful event. Also, a big thank you to Sunrise Rotary, who has their event this week. It should be a phenomenal event. Just a huge outpouring from the community. I can't begin to say all the people that have contributed money, and to kind of piggyback on what Amy Mendez said, we had some of our businesses that are being impacted really hard by these mandates were some of the ones that gave very generous donations to both the Sunrise Rotary and also helped with some things with the toy drive with some food and things. And so these businesses continue to give even though they're being impacted. They never disappoint, and just shows the extent of love that our businesses have for the community, and they continue to support the community. Thanks to Galt PD, CSD, for the toy drive, letting me be a part of that again. You guys are phenomenal, and you guys are going to make a lot of kids happy this weekend when you do the distribution. So thank you again to Laurel Shamber and all of her team at CSD, and to the chief, lieutenant, all the officers that were participated in the part of the toy drive that I was the small piece that I was involved with. Thank you for taking time out of your day on that. And then next, I wanted to just, I know last meeting, we had new council members coming in, and we had outgoing council members that were being congratulated and thanked for their service. And I, at the end of the meeting, I didn't really want to dwell too hard on, my appointment to mayor. So I didn't want people to think that I was not very thankful for that. So I wanted to say tonight that I am very thankful to all of you, and to the community for being very supportive. I've gotten a lot of comments of support, and I just want to remind everybody that that a mayor is only as good as his council and the staff that he has, and I feel like we got a great staff. It's really one of the reasons why I accepted the mayorship, is because I feel like we got a really good team here, and I look forward to hopefully a much better year next year. But I want to thank you all for your work and supporting me in this new role. And it is a great honor. So thank you. And last but not least, just want to wish all the citizens of Galt happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, a safe holiday. And it is a difficult time, and it's going to be a little different Christmas than we've ever experienced. But I feel like there's always something to be thankful for, and always something to be happy about. So with that, I want to wish everybody who's watching, citizens of Galt, and all his staff and all of my fellow council members, a happy holiday and a happy new year. And with that, if no one else has anything to add, I will adjourn the meeting tonight. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Have a good evening.